Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Today is Pi Day, March 14th, and it is the Horsehead Central School District Regular Board of Education meeting. At this time, I'd like to turn it over to our President, Warren Conklin, for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Everybody please stand. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn to executive session to discuss individual personnel matter and negotiations.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed?
We will be back roughly around 6 o'clock. Thank you.
We are reconvening the public session from an executive session meeting. We've already said the pledge. So moving on to agenda item number 2, on approval of 2 Board of Education meetings. Can I have a motion, please?
Second.
Curiosities, discussion, comments?
Yes, there was one point in one of the minutes of the meetings, and I don't know if it was the first one or the second one offhand, but it said $1.4 million for Center Street and Big Flats. I had said $1.4 million for Center Street and $780,000 for Big Flats. So I wanted to make sure that was corrected. And I think that was the only correction I saw. I did have several questions about that. You want to wait till board member comments for the questions on the minutes? Okay, thank you.
Other curiosities? Call a motion, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? All right, now we move to agenda item number 3, community questions and comments. I have a long list of things to read if I have comments. I don't want to read it all if nobody wants to come forward. I guess I'm skirting the issue a little bit, but if somebody has a question, we're more than happy to hear. We invite you to the podium to talk. Okay. Then we're going to go to item number 4. Mr. Miller.
Hello. The senior class is still preparing for prom, getting senior superlatives around to announce during dinner. The class of 2026 and the class of 2027 was at their Powder Duff volleyball game. And the class of 2027 was victorious against the class of 2026 in the teacher team. The juniors are finalizing everything for their prom, which is next Saturday, 7 to 10 p.m. at the Elks Club. Intermediate school students in Mrs. Ward's class competed in Domino Math Day by playing fun domino math games. The first time since 2018, Horseheads High School students had the opportunity to travel to Quebec City. The trip took place during February break. They toured the old city on foot, where they tried dog sledding, snowshoes, went tubing on giant slopes, and ice skating. Chaperones Miss Smith and Miss Bratz enjoyed spending 4 days with the group. Bratz is looking forward to planning another trip for 2026. We would like to thank volunteers from Corn Incorporated and other organizations who read to our students at Ridge Road, Gardner Road, and Center Street as part of the African American region of the Southern team. The cheerleading team took 3rd place in New York State. The girls varsity basketball team won the Class AA sectional championship, number 10 for Coach Scott and coaching staff. Unified bowling finished up with Team 1 placing 3rd in sectionals and Team 2 placing 4th. SpongeBob the Musical opens tonight, which is where I am off to shortly. The show runs through Saturday, March 16th. Show times are 7 p.m. each night. with an additional matinee at 2 p.m. on Saturday. This production involves about 85 district students on stage, tech crew, and pit. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I think the proper terminology is break a leg tonight, is that true? Okay. Now we have section number 5, and we start with our report from the superintendent, Dr. Douglas.
I will try to make it quick because Anthony has already covered a lot. I may cover a couple. Obviously, real quick, if you have a chance, Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday matinee at 2 o'clock, and I think Saturday evening is SpongeBob the Musical at the high school. I know they have been working all week on the dress rehearsals. I know our pre-K kindergarten kids, they absolutely loved it. Right, Mrs. Ack? And she's got pictures of it. The kids had a wonderful. What better than SpongeBob SquarePants? I guess the night of our community forum, I sort of drove Mr. Chabon a little nuts because unknown to us is the cafeteria microphone that's wireless was actually on the same frequency as their dress rehearsal. So while I was giving my presentation, Mr. Chabon was running around going, what the heck is happening? And then at the end of the night, after we came back from the tour, he came in and he goes, that's who it was. And I said, if I'd known that, I would have done all kinds of voiceovers. So, but the kids did it in stride and they had a much better rehearsal the next night. What we were talking about is we held our community capital project update for the community, which we widely advertised, just like our community safety and security, as well as our cyber discussion for the community. And that was Tuesday night at March 12th. We had that update, but there wasn't a lot of interest, so I don't know how to take it sometimes either one or two ways. Either people just aren't worried about it or they're happy with everything. So I can't say anything, but the district did its best job of trying to get out and emailing out and putting things out around the community so that they knew they had that opportunity for the open house. In addition, April 8th, we mentioned it, the last one is a solar eclipse. It's a very unusual day. The district has already put out that we will be transitioning to a half day on that day. We were going to have the high school releasing to try to help parents at home so that when the younger kids get home, they already have hopefully an older sibling there, but we also wanted to give enough notice so people can arrange for that. And that's at the request of local municipalities trying to make sure that traffic flow and everything is okay. That will happen somewhere, I think, around 2 o'clock to about 4 o'clock with the full 99% total eclipse in this area, roughly, I think, about Tony, is it 3:02 or 3:22? Right in there. It's going to be dark. So we just wanted to let people know. There are some schools out there that are now shifting from a half day to a full day. We will not be. We will be doing a half day, sticking to our plan. As any potential use of snow days, I will not finalize until up to the spring break. Officially, I do not have to provide any give back day at all for the district. However, it's a long year. If I'm probably going to consider it around spring break, it's probably an extra day at the Memorial Day weekend. But that communication officially, if it goes out, will only go out at the spring break time, which is I think around April 19, 20 or something like that. Yeah, I wish I knew the date. So please look for that. We have on Monday a district superintendent's conference day, and for the board to know, there's a wellness fair in 2024. You're all welcome out. 11 to 1 at the middle school. This will be in the update this week. But that's for our staff as we work on our own wellness as well as community connections, because we have a lot of people that work in the community that are coming out. And I want to thank Tiffany, her group, as well as our professional development committee, because all of this would not happen without everybody's hard work. And thank you. I know that really puts a stressor on everybody. So that's coming up. Our spring sports season has begun. We're basically in the last trimester of school. This is the sports season an extracurricular season that makes everything fly, because On Mr. Coughlin's part, it's the roughest one, trying to get those baseball people out and softball people out, but I think they're going to get out before the April 1st deadline, which we tried to set, and I know Mr. Conklin is well aware of. But what happened is we have had unusually warm weather at this point, and everybody's working as fast as possible to give everybody the best opportunities. So please come on out. This will probably be our last year of free admission to all of our events, as we as well as the region is starting to return to fee-based entry. So we just want to give people a heads up on that. In addition, over the past couple months, we've been talking about apps. I'm just giving an update on the apps. The A&E, or Athletics and Extracurricular Committee, is now taking some of the discussions that the board had, and they are working on any finalizations of potential recommendations for me to consider to bring back to the board for a final process for the coming school year. We just completed the last one under the temporary guidance. We had no issues that we are aware of. Matter of fact, every student declined any use of the gown. We thought that was not necessarily to their favor. And we did have one individual that chose to come in, and we appreciate that's always been the case. But in general, all the kids went through and proceeded without any issue. And I want to thank Kristen and her team as they changed some communication protocols to really double check, and I don't think we had anyone complaining whatsoever. Mr. Tay would be doing that, but he's at a state level review right now. So I want to thank you as well as the nurses and everybody and all of our parents for really complying. As well, that's pretty much, I'm going to keep that to that point. We do need to understand that within our community, these are the challenging days. Weather will be turning back to a little cooler next week, and we can see some very weird weather here. Please bear with us as we don't want to show ourselves, so we will try to keep an eye on it. At that point, that concludes my report, and I'm ready to move to the budget presentation, which will take us on.
Okay, so next we have item 5.02 on the agenda, which is budget update, technology, and facilities.
This must be set up for Bill. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Tonight is a continued preliminary budget overview for March 14th. We built the budget, each of our presentations, either a budget workshop or a regular board education meeting. Ladies and gentlemen, there's financial challenges currently facing districts in New York State for the 24-25 year. For those that tuned in before, this will possibly be redundant if you've heard it before, but we use each avenue to make sure people hear as much as possible the same issues over and over and over again, so that if it's their first time or their second or third time tuning in, they know that we're saying the same things in the most transparent fashion. Ladies and gentlemen, the comptroller issues physical stress monitoring systems each year. 3 years ago, 2021, there was no designation, as well as in 22 and 23. However, you can see that some of the numbers were showing some slight upticks in 21, 22, and then they fell off last year. However, I think that you'll see is that we are experiencing some potential stress in our district for the 24 year, but they don't project the year that you're in. They always project the year behind, which is so helpful from the comptroller. We need to make sure to remind people that in 2008, 2009, the Great Recession, the state reacted by automatically cutting almost $2.3 or $2.8 billion from school districts. For the Horsehead Central School District over that time period, it totaled $21.518020 million of lost state revenue. Now, we didn't lose $21 million overnight. We lost it in $4 million, $5.8, $5 million, 3.7, and 2.8 in 5 consecutive years. And if you average that out of what it would mean to our budget should roughly be supported
supported by an additional $4.3 million of state revenue that they have never returned, not only to horses, but to every single district in the state. And that has impacts that eventually would always come to bear on districts, and people are seeing it, especially this year. Our specific challenges in this year's budget, as well as next year, are health insurance challenges, and primarily because we went through a pandemic. Our health care is self-funded, so we pay all claims. If we have no claims, we pay nothing. But if we have more than enough claims, we might have to pay more than what's budgeted for. There's no way of anticipating. But that was a decision made by the district and boards of education long ago. And because of that, that is where our contracts are positioned. As well as during contractual services, we've all experienced inflation, whether it's supplies, whether it's utilities. I mean, anybody can look at their Spectrum bill and you know it goes up every year. But whether it's phone, whether it's your utilities, whether it's gas, whether it's electric, your labor costs are going up because several contracts will go up. This challenge has nothing to do with the settlements of our labor contracts. The labor contracts are in line with all labor contracts in the area and reasonableness within the profession to maintain and recruit the best possible staff. And that is even a challenge. Everybody knows that food has gone up substantially, even higher with inflation, and on and on. So past inflation and now ongoing inflation, as we just saw this week, as inflation is heading up again this past week, are major challenges for every school district, but more so for us this year, especially because of inflation and health insurance. Specifically, the district has a tax on true rate comparison, which tax on true basically means that if you're comparing Corning Painted Post, Elmira Heights, Elmira, Horseheads, or any other district, we are required to report the tax on true. And what that really means is if you take whatever your yearly tax on true dollar amount is, you can compare a $100,000 home in District A, B, C, D, or F, and it will truly tell you whether or not you're the highest tax, middle tax, or lowest tax in your region. If you notice on 2023-24, our tax on true was 16.38. On a $100,000 home, that means the person that owned that house would pay $1,638 for that year for that $100,000 house. And of course, if you had 200, you multiply it by 2, 300 by 3, 400 by 4. If you look at Corning, Elmira Heights, and Elmira, in that same year in Corning, a $100,000 house would pay $2,089. And as you can see, that's almost $400 more in Corning than it is here. And this is not trying to say Corning's worse or anything else. It's just trying to let people understand that this Board of Education over the past decade has pretty much gone from about 1830 down to 1638, and yet maintained its budget, did its capital planning, which was long overdue because all the buildings were out of date with the roofs and infrastructure and leaking profusely, right, Mr. Cotton? That now we can honestly say the boards of education over the past decade have started to address that and put in a plan that over the next 50 to 60 years could potentially make sure that the district never sees that again. If you look at Elmira Heights, just to the south, a $100,000 house in Elmira Heights would have a tax of $1,875. We do not have the number for Elmira. Sometimes we can get it from websites. Sometimes we may not get it, and sometimes people don't share it. We will always share ours. What this is really saying is we have done as best we could to try and make sure to be A, fiscally responsible, also structurally responsible, and educationally responsible. And the product that we give is a school district at completion that almost 50% of our kids graduate at mastery learning level, above 85 percentage points or higher. That's the #1 school in the region in that category. In addition, we also try to compare what happens with tax levy and tax rate. And the reason we do this is over the past decade, the tax levy amount does not matter. All the tax levy percentages is how much you levied in one year and how much that levy is going to increase in the next year. But what really matters is the yellow column, and that's the rate that we were just talking about. Because if you look at this diagram and go and look at 22-23, from 21-22, notice the tax levy increased. It increased by 2.97%. So some people will say, oh, my taxes are going up by 2.97%. That's actually inaccurate. The tax rate in 21-22 was $17.32. For a $100,000 house, it was $1,732. But the next year, we raised the tax levy, 2.97. But because we had substantial growth in our wealth factor for the entire Horseheads district, the tax rate actually went down by 7.39%, or $1.28. So that same $100,000 house, one year would pay $1,732. The next year, as long as the assessment didn't change, would have paid $1,604. The issue is people will say, well, my taxes went up. Taxes may go up for an individual homeowner, even if their rate goes down. But it's usually because they've been reassessed. And we know that that happens. That's something the school does not have any control over. But what the assessor is saying is your house is now worth more if you sell it. And usually that far outpaces any tax increase that when you sell it, even if you pay for 10 or 15 years, the higher tax rate, you're still making a profit on your house. Now, some people won't be selling their house, and we understand that. But the value is there, and that's your return on investment in your school. So we pay attention to tax rate, and we want people to understand that, and that's why we talk about it. Remember, 2006-07 district tax rate was actually $19.40 per thousand. Right? Look at what the board has done, and you should be commended, and the community, I think, has appreciated that. Now, ladies and gentlemen, the real challenge is about inflation, so we have to take some time. This graph, I've already explained it, but what the bottom blue line is the property tax cap calculation levy that was put in place by Andrew Cuomo. In 2015, what happened was it was actually 2012 was the first year, but it went on. Districts cannot raise the tax levy by a calculation of no more than 2% CPI or less. So if the CPI in the year is 0.70, which is what was in 2015, no, it was 1.56, I'm sorry. In 2015, you could raise the levy up by that percentage. But the rate of inflation was at 0.7%, or less than 1%. That year, we're getting a little more aid in the district than the inflation rate. That's 1 year. Now, when you look out at that local revenue, in 2016, it's 0.73, 2017, 0.68, 2018, 1.84, 2019, 2, 2020, 2. It dipped a little in 21 because of the pandemic to 1.56, and it's been 2% each year, and this year it's 2%. In other words, the 2% tax levy that everybody knows is not 2%, it's a calculation. But that's the only amount of local revenue that a district is allowed to raise. The upper black line is inflation, and that orange shaded area is the amount that we did not keep up with inflation. Over that period of time, the district's loss of local revenue opportunity just to keep up with inflation is a loss of 21.3% of the ability to fund. That's roughly equates to $9.3 million that should be in our budget to keep up with inflation. Now, did we need it all at that point? Possibly not, but now, by not getting it, we are having a budget issue this year unanticipated because of health insurance and continued inflation. It's not just on the local level, because this is the local tax base. It's also on the state level, the same exact thing. The blue line is what the state said they will give to the district to fund education while they put mandate upon mandate and they draw back funding. The black line is that rate of inflation. And notice, really only 1 year, and that was last year, they stopped the foundation aid and they gave us 10.42, all districts, in additional aid, and the rate of inflation was 6.4. So you'd think we're being overfunded by the state for that year. But when you take all the other years in that orange, we were never even being funded by the state. They minimize what we can do locally, and they minimize what they would do just to keep up with the rate of inflation. That shaded area, taking into consideration even the year where they overfunded us, still leaves the district short of about 11.3% of inflationary funding that the state should have provided, or about $2.9 million. The reason why this is important is, as we go back, $4.3 million from the gap elimination that was never returned. 9.3, that's 13.6. 2.9, 15, 17.2 million dollars that the state or the local has not been able to keep up with inflation. Our budget gap started out, and it's changed a little, but about 15.4. If we had that funding, we wouldn't have a problem, and all we're doing is just keeping up the rate of inflation. And that's our obligation, because no matter what, our bills are always going to keep up that. And so that's why this is important, so people understand. This isn't something that's happening. It's been happening slowly over the year. We've been able to manage it because we've had low healthcare costs. The pandemic's over. The contracts for the hospitals, medical, are all due, and they're being renegotiated. And guess what? Inflation has risen there too, and if they're settling a new contract, they're in the ability to grab all that inflationary back so that they can be viable. If they grab it back, who are they passing it on to? Us. And that is what's causing our financial stress. Ladies and gentlemen, I've given you my open. I'll continue to give that open because it explains a lot of what's going on. Tonight, we continue with our preliminary budget overview of March 14th, 2024. I'd like to turn it over to Katie Pizzetti at this time, our Assistant Superintendent for Business.
We'll join us right up for the tech budget, and then my cousin will join us for the facilities, and then Tony and I will tag team it for the budget update for May.
Somebody lowered this. Good evening. Bill Giancolli, I'm the Director of Technology here at Forsyths, and I just want to go through some of our budget lines, talk about some of the things that we're doing with those budget lines, and some of the possible reductions that we have talked about to help us here. So looking at the first line, equipment, as you can see, that went down. We'll talk a little bit more about that as the evening rolls on. But just to kind of give you a broader picture of the equipment, overall, we have probably a little over 8,000 different devices that we use for, like, CPU and some kind of technology connected to it that deserve some attention as far as whether it's programming, electricity, things of that nature that we have throughout the district. In this is a large number of laptops that we do to help with our one-to-one initiative. Our one-to-one initiative, we have one computer for every student from second grade all the way up through seniors in high school, along with some spares to keep those rotating, because they don't last when they're moving from one place to another. Things happen, and we try to make sure that the students are never without. With that, we also do carry about roughly 3,600 for the students. Then we do provide all instructional staff with a laptop so that they can remain mobile, be able to do work at home, plan, prepare, especially with our learning management system, Canvas, being able to prepare at home if we need to. Also, we do provide laptops for our operational staffs, clerical, where needed, guidance, and just day-to-day admins. We also, for our pre-K through first grade, we do supply a large number of iPads. Now, we do not go one-to-one because computer use at pre-K through first tends to be a little bit more, I forgot what they're called, little segments of students getting together. Centers, thank you. I know that's a tough word to pull out. So the centers, having those centers, that's usually students who will need like 5 or 6 and then return to the car. So we do have a set of iPads because of the touch screen, the ease of use, so we do try to factor that in. We also keep CPUs in the classroom so that the instructors anybody can go into any classroom and fire it up with the Promethean panels. We've had a big initiative over the last few years putting Promethean panels in all the classrooms. We have completed the high school, middle school, intermediate school, and we've been dabbling in the elementary schools, and we're looking to increase more with some grants that we'll talk later on. All of these devices, when we talk about network devices, the devices that do this because I'm going to hurt my back later. All the network devices that we run on, it's about 6,500 different network devices that touch our network. They go out to the internet. These all do need to be replenished. They are on a cycle. They have a lifespan. We try to get the most out of them, which is about 5 years. But every 5 years we have to rotate another. And instead, what we're trying to do with our budget is trying to make it a nice, flat, nice little wave by trying to replenish those and keep up with that by replacing them when we can. We've done a nice job over, especially during the pandemic years, of trying to be aware of that and straighten that out. And that is going to allow us to make some reductions this year to help out the budget. And we're going to talk more about that later. So along with the equipment, we also have just your odds and ends from printers to document cameras, all kinds of things that my team touches or helps maintain. In that comes supply line. And supply line, we have cabling, and here's a word you've not heard, dongles. Dongles are a big broad term for a bunch of little different attachments so that we can convert HDMI to USB. I'm going to throw out a lot of little acronyms for you. I don't even know what half of them mean, but they are very useful. RJ45s to USB dongles are very important because they help us actually image all our computers, so we have to have those on hand. And those die out as well, so we have to keep replenishing them. One of the big things that we've done with this 1-1 initiative, and has really started this year, is that I've gone out and we've gotten our team Dell certified for repairs, where you turn the repairs in-house so that my team can actually order repairs. They don't even need to go through me. They can go through Dell. The computer's under warranty. They can order a part, have it come in. They can take it apart, put it back together, and replace the screens. What we're discovering with the 7th and 8th grade, who we've started sending them home, there's a lot of cracked screens. And what happens with those is that it's nothing malicious. They kind of get in the backpack, something happens, a little hairline fracture. My team is now able, it used to be you would send them out to Dell, you'd have to pack it up, send it out, you would have to come back. That could be up to 2 weeks that a student doesn't have that laptop. Now they can be done in-house. We order the part, they're usually within here a couple of days, and we can actually perform that. And then being Dell, with my tech team being Dell certified, that gives us an opportunity to start next year looking at Tier 2 Dell certification. What this will allow us to do, we can actually receive reimbursement from Dell for every repair we do. So we're starting to make some of these moves to make this work. It's great. It's like a little cobbler's workshop. You walk in and they have screens all over. It's fantastic. And we're looking to grow on that. So one of the things we had to do was increase our supply line for those parts. Screens, keyboards, you wouldn't believe the letter J pops right off. It's always the letter J, don't know why. So we always have to replace those. The supply line did go up. What we found is a lot of the standard warranties tend to run around 3 years or so, but we want to try to get 5 years out of these computers. So in doing so, we have to kind of self-maintain with this hardware. And we can either go out and try to extend the warranties, which is quite a costly endeavor, or we start putting the supplies in. Right now, it is cheaper for us to buy supplies, repair in-house, and have them repaired right there. We also order with supplies, peripherals, as far as monitors, mice, all the little things that you would need, or not even think about, power cords and what have you. Contractual services, we did go down a little bit. Contractual services are when my team reaches a point where we don't have the capacity or we do not have the skill set for certain things. Like AV, audio equipment on stage, we can fix it to a point, but then we do have to call out to some maintenance and subcontract and have them come in and take care of that. Over the years, we've been good about trying to really get control. A lot of things are cloud-based, so we do have a lot better handle on that, and some of our processes have allowed us to kind of keep things up. Especially with the capital campaign, a lot more things, so we didn't have to worry about this line as much. But for just one example, the sign out front, the high school, that eventually we needed a special technician to come in and take a look at that. It's always funny when they do something, you're even wowed by what they do. Now, the summer help is very critical. As I mentioned, all those devices that we have throughout the year, every summer, we wipe them, re-image them, clean them up, get them back in the carts, get them all charged, make sure they are up to date. That's one of the things that a lot of people don't understand, that we have to keep our computers now more than ever with data security. We have to keep those updates going. We have to keep our computers up to the latest updates. And that's a very important thing. That's something I will talk about when we get to our BOCES line. So summer help, having a few extra summer helpers is critical. I would like to say that we teach them a lot of technical stuff, but I'll be honest, it's a lot of grunt work. We opening computers, re-imaging computers, plugging things in, plugging things out while the team is doing a lot of other things. So that is a very critical piece to our budget. Now, BOCES. BOCES, we cannot exist without BOCES assistance. BOCES runs the regional network. They have the entire network and the major NOC that helps run 21 school districts. They are our internet service provider. They provide telecom for us, which is our voice and all our phones. They also provide servers, so protecting all the individual profiles and our computers. They also help maintain our servers and switches. We do not house a lot of servers on site. We host a lot of them up at Building 4 up on Bush campus. And a lot of those servers do a lot of services for us. So we try to keep, but they maintain those for us, which is a great thing. Also, it's also good because they back up our nightly, they back up a lot of our drives so that if there's ever a loss or anything catastrophic, we can get that information back. One of the other things that's huge is their security. Their security is exceptional for educational. When you see a lot of school districts, especially small, and I've worked at multiple different school districts, some of them do not have the security. And you hear the stories with ransomware. In fact, last night I got an email about 10:30 at night. We had to, server team contacted me. There was a computer, a student computer that had ransomware on it. They shut that down. They isolated from the network that night. My team retrieved the laptop. We're now working on replacing that student's laptop. There was nothing malicious that the student was doing. It was all just a matter of somehow they were on their own network, something got into their system. And all it takes is one bad actor or virus to get into our network that can be kind of detrimental. So we have very tight security, and we do keep up with it. Some of the other things that we do with BOCES is that we do purchase a lot of our equipment needs through BOCES and some software. So what this does provide for us, this is what I like to call smart money. Because what we're doing is we're investing through BOCES, and we get paid back on those. So every computer we buy, we're getting some money back. So it's a good choice, especially with the software. We end up sharing with other districts. And what that does is that not only brings the cost down, so we can afford some really nice softwares, but it also, again, provides us the API where it can. So BOCES is very instrumental in our network. We will talk a little bit more about some of the, I think later in the slides, about some of the things that we are doing with laptops and the rotation and what we're going to do with that. But at this time, are there any questions regarding technology? Yes. My team is currently, I have 6 technicians. I'm sorry, let me recount that. Sorry, all right. 7 technicians and myself.
Okay. And then the server-looking box outside of this building, what is that in comparison to the stuff up in Building 4?
Survey, breakdown the hall here?
Yes.
Oh, that's our brain. That is our MDF. So I'm gonna get in the weeds here. I'm gonna break out my nerd card on this one. All right. So every building has an MDF. That's where the actual fiber comes in. All right. And when that hits here, then what we have is multiple closets throughout the buildings, and these are IDFs. You can only be around 300 feet away from each, where all the network drops that you see here, all the access points. So that's our main rating, actually, for the district. Anything ever happens to that, well, not going to work. No, it's a really important piece, and every building has an MDF. Yeah. Yes?
Do the kids in the 2nd to 4th grade, do they bring their laptops home on a regular basis, or is that mostly just like in classroom usage?
No, the only ones who have our mobile are 7th through 12th.
Okay.
Yeah, and so 2nd grade, every classroom has a cart with a computer that's assigned to them, and then we have like 1 or 2 in each cart for a spare.
Okay. And then, when you do the supplies, do you guys do purchase orders ahead of time for the supplies? Is that how that works? Or is that like a different category?
If you mean by ahead of time, we try to, when we look ahead, like in the summer, when I get to the summer, I kind of say, we look at what we need, talk to my team, they're like, hey, we're going to want to increase our cabling here, here, and here, and then we order. But then we keep them in there, and it kind of happens in real time. Like, oh, wow, we need these extra dongles, and then I go out and get them. Or we have 15 broken screens, and then I would order from that. So if that's what you're going for, if that's what you're asking.
I would just like to expand on that. So that question is not specifically to the technology department. Purchase orders are required for all district purchasing.
Okay.
So it's not specific to this. Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, okay. And thank you.
Any questions? Well, thank you. Now introducing my colleague for facilities.
All right. Good evening, everybody. Mike Hag, I'm Director of Facilities for the Merced School District. I'm not the technology guy. All right, but I was able to move that. The first slide you're seeing in front of you, I think I went back to. There you go. There's my first slide. All right. First slide you're seeing on services for overview for facilities. Salary, pretty much contractual that we follow through 2023 and 2024. Very good. All right. I'm doing that right now. 2023, 2024 was $2,757,564. And the budget for next year is $2,847,000. That's pretty much driven by all contractual contracts they have. Move on to my next line item on there is my equipment and vehicles for facilities. Last year's budget was $282,053. And this could be from lawnmowers, snow blowers, trucks, weed whackers, vacuums, floor scrubbing machines, ongoing cycle that we do rotate, come around. I have reduced that down this year to $241,000. Mr. Johnson and I spent some time during the budget cycle looking at vehicles and where we stand. And other meetings we have, so there is a reduction in that line, and that's been moved down into so those monies in contracted services. We'll talk a little more about that. Next line item last year was the utilities. That's the power, electric, gas throughout the district. It was $670,000. I'm using a projected number. This is something that's still in the work of $800,000. We purchase it through a group from
OCM.
BOCES. That bid for utilities was due to be open on March 1st. We've got to see those numbers. So I did go with a projected number working with Mr. Delorme, our energy manager in the district, kind of on what they were projecting it to be. So I think this will move around a little bit. I would like to talk real quick on utilities. We took a building, and what I want to talk, you see the increase, and there will be an increase when we open it because the cost has gone up, delivery's gone up. But we've done a baseline on Center Street. We talked about moving to chillers, climate control in the buildings, what these costs would do. We were able to trend Center Street prior to changing the boilers, going from steam, adding chillers, efficiency in the control systems that we are able to automate. Everything's network, running over Bill's system and shut them down. We've been able to trend, last year was the first year that Center Street had climate control, chillers running in the summer. And keep in mind, this is a building that's used year-round. We have extended school year, not just when school's out. That building is quite a bit during the summer, but we were able to trim that. And what we have found out, we are using less utilities, less electric and gas, before we chill that building down. The efficiencies we've done through capital, changing the boilers, LED lighting, controls, and then the chiller. So this number will, once that bid's opened up and Dan and I have a chance to review that, we're hopeful. We're kind of using what we could project at the time when we were working on the budget. But I just wanted to gauge that. We don't have enough training data on some other buildings we're working on. We'll be training the high school shortly, but we're still under some construction. That gave us a baseline that this investment for the Board of Education, the taxpayers have updating the boilers. Okay? The boilers were 60 years old. The energy efficiency was able for us to bring chillers in there and reduce the waste. So more to come on the utility side of it. Once the budget, once we get the new contract, which will run for 3 years, we do a really good job protecting from there. We have a ton of trending data over the years. We know from the 3 days outside what it costs us and what we do so we can put out a really good budget for utility. So more will probably come on that once we're able to look at those numbers.
Just say one thing. Not only did the cost go down, we added a month of instruction. It's called the month of June. Right, Warren? No learning happened in June. It's too hot. So you increase the educational setting environment and save money. So money well spent.
Thank you, Dan. Just wanted to bring that up. We're working through there, reap some of the benefits of the investments we put in our buildings. The next one's going down to contracted services. Last year, 400, 330, 460. This year, it is driven up to 491, 460. Those are driven on, we're seeing that inflation, our seamless controls, elevator services. They are maintaining the cameras that we have coming online, the bill service contracts, and put out RFPs and bids on it. We did see an increase in there, so that's what's driven the contracted services up. But it could be from sprinkler tests, anything that we do sign as labor involved with it with another contracted services. The next one that you'll be seeing coming is custodial maintenance supplies. Went from 304,250 to 337, 250 projected. Inflation, just again, everything's just costing so much more. Case of toilet paper, how much they get for that now? But we've seen this and it's trickled along. So this is our projected for next year, really out of our hands. We've actually brought vendors in, some technology, and some of the things we're doing. We're using less, but it's just costing more. On the BOCES, went from 7,752 to 8,140. That's a service we do for our energy contract that's out to bid right now. BOCES runs that contract for multiple school districts, and that's a service that they hit it on. And then there's an increase on there. So total increase on what you're seeing on this slide on here is 6.06. Next portion of my budget, have 7 full-time employees. This, the first line you're seeing is myself, facility director, my supervisors, and my secretary clerical. You are seeing a slight reduction in there, and that was due to some retirements and employees changing, moving. I had a long-time employee, Mr. Austin, retired, and his replacement coming in a little lower, so you do see a slight reduction in there. That's pretty much regular contractual as well. Maintaining a custodian of 42. Last year, $1,495,401. This year, due to contractual, $1,567,723. I maintain a maintenance staff of 12. And in the maintenance department, that could be the grounds department, the electrical department, plumbing department, and HVAC side. And then again, the increase you're seeing there is contractual on that. Really, skill set has grown, as Bill has said. We do a lot in-house. We get a lot of bang for our buck on that maintenance. Very proud on the things that they've been able to accomplish on the construction done and maintained. Next line item on my budget would be the overtime substitutes for cleaners and summer help. That's down slightly that we look on it after reviewing what we've used. I think, that's all snow removal, that's all activities, Friday night games, any of the maintenance required. Substitutes that we have to bring in when cleaners are out, and summer help. And once again, as Bill had mentioned, not only is it a lifelong skill, you get to watch these young guys grow up, and there might be some college kids coming out of that. We get a lot of bang for our buck. We really think the task, when the school year is done and everyone's gone, every single room will be empty. All that furniture will be moved out. That room will be cleaned, those floors will be waxed, and they come back and we clean that furniture and they put back. It's a major task. Without the summer help and that grunt labor, I paraphrase kind of what Bill was saying, very vital to our operation. Summer maintenance we're doing, a lot of painting we get to. So that's what that line item is there, and that's pretty well staying pretty flat, slightly down. Stipends is following the same number that was projected from last year. My energy manager, stipends to have it. We do our pool. We're required to have license in New York State pool spa operator to maintain a pool. And the person takes a class, there's a stipend there. We do some of our herbicide and pesticide treatments in the summer when we can, that not outside requires a license, and stipends are on that. And the energy managers in that stipend as well. At this time, I'll take any questions or yes.
I'm just wondering about the 42. I know that we're always struggling to make sure we're staffed. Is the 42 full-time custodians, is that our goal? Is that what we have?
Well, it's always fluctuating. We've been struggling. We've worked on it where we've had trouble to maintain rate at that 42 at times. You guys have heard it very well now. I feel at 42 we're real close right now. I'm going to do interviews again next week. It's an ongoing rotation. It's not for everyone. What I'm projecting right now is the 42 is what's in the budget that we'll need, and we'll evaluate if other things come on next year. For instance, Gardner Road, Big Flats and Gardner Road will have a wing, but I might be shifting some staffing on that because currently we use some extra staff during the day. That will probably be flexible. Hopefully we won't have to later on, but lunches are very creative at Gardner Road and Big Flats, knowing that we have to set up 2 to 3 times the gym. On the evening, we set it up in the morning, and we have to break it back down. We only have half the gym, the eating classrooms, cleaning up, as well as how dirty it gets during the day with construction, people in and out, so someone just running around the whole time. So we'll adjust that. At this time, I'm very comfortable and very grateful to have 42 in there. I think they do a really nice job walking around some of the buildings that are aged as we walk. Not only that, maintaining what we just invested millions of dollars in. Good question. Any other questions? All right, I'm done.
Don't like that public speaking.
I'm sitting
right over here.
So on to the overall budget, we have some updates to our, we've been talking about since the middle of February. The items noted in yellow are where we've had some updates. A minor update to foundation aid, at this point, another $69,000. They released an updated foundation aid number based on the February database. Went in and took a look at that, based on what we know we're getting, exclusive of that change in the inflation factor in the formula, we can increase foundation aid by another $69,000. Still holding out that one piece that we're hoping to get. Dr. Douglas, I don't know if you want to share the latest that you heard that.
I'll come down and do
You want
that
to come
later.
do that later?
I don't want to slow you down.
It's not good news, we'll just leave it at that, but we'll see, time will tell. And then the building aid also increased $542,000. I've been talking with you about fiscal advisors, doing a full review of the capital projects, given the changes that Melvin talked with the board about the shifts in the cost of the projects and things of that nature. So a full analysis was done on that, and based on the information we have today, we're actually able to increase our building aid by $542,000. So that $9 million is what we use to help offset the cost of our debt service for our projects. That's the 80% change that the state dedicates to our schools for these capital projects. So total now, we have state aid at $47.8 million, $4 million increase or 9.18%. Tax levy limit, we know the rules behind that. Nothing has changed on this slide. I just want to point out again that that highlighted line, that's the 2% that Dr. Douglas talked about earlier. That's the portion of the formula that is capped regardless of how high that inflation factor actually is. So that highlighted number, that capital exclusion, recall that's the piece of the calculation that allows us to levy a tax on capital expenditures. So it's our debt service payments on capital projects and busing, offset by the building aid that we just looked at and the capital aid on our transportation expenses. Once those two are combined and washed together, that positive number allows us to levy a tax. This is typically the plan within a capital project. We always talk about that share that's supported by the state, that 80% building aid figure, and then we always talk about that local share. So this would be that local share portion that we talk about that has been part of the plan through our capital project process to help support our future plans. So a couple changes within that. We have the change of building aid that I just mentioned that helps drive the levy down. We did have some changes to our debt service payments. I mentioned before, they're a little fluid at this point until we kind of land on where we want to be. With the additional aid we're seeing now on referendum 2, we kind of took the opportunity to see if we could smooth out future payments like we like to do. Bill mentioned the same thing. With the laptops, we don't want to see big dips and spikes. Try to keep things level, so there's an exercise there. So that service did change some. But all told, the levy did go down slightly from the 15.3, I think it was last time maybe, to 14.76%, or a $6.4 million increase. Summary of the budgeted revenues. Recall we don't include the increase in the levy at this time, at least on this slide. Future decision and discussion for the board. Updated state aid, other revenue remain constant. So total revenue exclusive of the levy, reserves and fund balance is $94 million. Any questions on revenue before we hop over? So just a reminder before we get into some updates on the expenditure side, these are all the adjustments we talked about at the last meeting. We want to kind of keep this running list going for everyone so that you can see the work we've been doing throughout this process as we work to close this gap. So a variety of BOE services were looked at, the bus study, an accounting change for the school lunch monitors, some salary adjustments, and the increase to the health contributions. And of course, before we get into some of the bigger topics, throughout the budget process, there will be just the standard adjustments that we need to make, exclusive of trying to balance that gap. So a few things here. Salaries went down $213,000, large part in due to the retirement breakage that we see. We pulled out the higher salaries of those retiring, came up with an estimated new higher pay, and the difference in savings to the general fund. Offset by the mid-year course credit increases for the teachers that can take additional courses. There's a horizontal schedule within their contract, I'll say that right now, that allows them to accrue those credits for additional compensation. So that's a component of this as well. Bonus, a small adjustment there, primarily due to a posting service through the special programs that's no longer needed. We talked about this during the last budget cycle. For years, we had contracted with a company called Paragon. They did our Affordable Care Act tracking and compliance since the onset of the Affordable Care Act. We talked last year that we're going to work on transitioning that in-house and doing away with the contract. Caitlin and her benefits ladies worked very hard, got a bank cap all set up and up and running, and we're now fully functional in-house. So we can drop that contract. That price represents half the year contract, which we knew we were going to drop it December 31st of this year, so the budget won't contain half the contract. But now the whole thing can go, and we can move forward in-house. So good job, Caitlin, and your team. That was a lot of work. Debt service, this is a positive. As I mentioned, there were some adjustments made. One, the smoothing out of referendum 2 because of the increase in aid, we kind of shifted the principal and interest around a little bit, so that was about $200,000 of that. And then the other $93,000 is an adjustment to the principal and interest that we'll pay on the long-term note for referendum 1. We talked before that currently budget's also challenged for the very same reasons that Dr. Douglas talked about earlier. So we're looking for ways to balance things out this year as well, 3/4 of the way through the fiscal year. So one thing that we can do is reduce our principal payment on referendum 1 to the legal due minimum. And by doing that, it'll save current fiscal year around $800,000. But that will need to be shifted over to the amortized schedule. So for year 1, it was an additional increase of $93,000. So a minimal shift over to next year for that. Any questions on it?
Do you have a question?
Sorry.
What you just said about the shifting to the capital project money, the funds, is that written down somewhere so we can see it?
Is what right now.
Because you were saying, could you just repeat what you said? I was trying to understand that.
So 2 components. Referendum 2, we have a debt schedule that's laid out currently to do 3 years of short-term notes. After 3 years, it's going to convert to a DASB long-term bond. So with what we try to do, and we develop these debt schedules with fiscal advisors, is try to maintain a level debt service schedule. So no year seems, here and up here and way down here, because that really fluctuates the tax cut calculation, and we want to, try to maintain as smooth as we can. So with the additional building aid, we took another look at it to see if we could even things out a little bit more, and it looks like we can, but we need to add a little bit more to this year. So again, it's not carved in stone. When we have that tax cut calculation in total, if there's a goal that the board wants to meet, that is an option we can look at to bring the levy back down. So, but that's where we're at now, just based on the futuring of the debt schedule. And then the $93 million is an increase to referendum 1 debt service for next year, principal and interest payments. We're reducing the principal payment that's due in June for this year. And because of that reduction, that principal has to be spread out over the remaining 15 years. So once that principal was redistributed over those out years, next year's debt service went up $93,000.
Okay. What was it originally supposed to be, the payment that we were supposed to originally make then? Before you changed the principal to be a lesser payment?
Gosh, what was it? 2.3 for principal. So
So we were supposed to be 2.3 for this year, million, and we reduced it down to 800,000.
That's the plan unless I'm directed.
In other words, we have not done that yet. We're telling you to try to handle this year's budget. If the board does not wish to do that or consider it, we may have to cut mid-year at this point.
What does that do, long-term as far as like the interest rate goes? Do we end up paying more over time, like later on, because we're choosing to pay less now?
So it's 200,000 over the course of 15 years. Once we convert to that, we get the benefit of a change in interest rate that's based on dad's creditworthiness, and they're a very large established institution, so they look at very favorable rates. So it's not really a major factor that will impact our future interest payments.
In other words, we will make a recommendation to the board will tell us which they would like.
So that's what's in there for now, but future checks.
Good evening. So as you know, we've been constantly looking at now reductions in the current next year's budget, and we've been reporting our proceeds. You saw those adjustments last time we spoke, and we added some more. Bill and his team, Jen Coley, have worked diligently, as well as our instructional leaders, to think about this differently and how we go about maintaining the level of services and staying the staff as long as possible. By leveraging some of those grants that we talked about last time and looking at our replacement cycles and increasing that possibly, and Bill and his team really recycling those computers appropriately, we see we can have another $70,000 on our laptop. We recall last time we had a $210,000 reduction. We spoke, and now we're looking at another 70 just in the laptops. Software, we continue to look at that usage and the duplicate nature of that, and what software do we have low usage at, and can we have work with Tiffany and Kelly and Joe and administrators on moving over from one particular software to another that has a duplicate use. So we are seeing a savings there, $58,000, and it will minor tweaks as we go through those users. Some of them don't even affect users, to be honest with you. A particular service, for instance, to allow the public to view movies that are on our network, and that we go through, and it's called Swank Public Viewing. So it's a software and a thing we offer for people that will watch movies outside the classroom. So, okay, well, we're focusing on instructional use, and what we're going to use for the instructional classroom, that's when we're not going to provide that service outside. So looking at taking the current software we have and saying, okay, we have all these pieces to it, what parts do we actually use, and how can we reformat those contracts to remove some of those extras that are not used in our instructional day. This next one is a change in a model. Community schools has been around for quite some time. We have put money in this coaster, and we really haven't used it. We're going to see two of them tonight. Community schools is it comes out of the origins of New York State, cooperating and using together on a variety of issues, whether it be health and wellness, dental, vision, mental health. There's a variety of different services that can be offered. The problem is that we haven't seen that the staffing's not there to support the program. We were spending this money, and what we really used out of it was some professional learning that we can otherwise do either in-house or contract individually. Specifically, there was some trauma-informed work that we did through this COSER, but it didn't amount to a fraction of that cost, and we can certainly continue to do our professional learning in that particular area without this COSER. So it's a strong recommendation and looking forward to move away from this particular COSER. We have a substantial amount of money. I believe the number is $35,000 in a workshop COSER. This allows our staff to access what's called the SIP catalog and Model Schools catalog. We don't use it to its fullest extent. I did a current year. Many things have moved more to online, and costs have come down on this one. I think we can reduce $10,000 without affecting professional learning. I will tell you that we should look at this line again, and it might come to limiting a certain professional learning we would offer to our staff. Again, it's nice to have, but we want to focus on $35,000, we might be able to find another 5 or 10 and still allow staff to participate in those workshops offered by BOCES.
Are teachers using those courses for CTLE hours?
Yes, some are. We have enough opportunities in-house given our conference days and our CTLE, the district supports the department chair and grade level chair meetings count as CTLE, as do building faculty meetings count as CTLE. So we embed quite a bit to meet that 100-hour requirement. And most teachers, if they just do what the current requirements are, they will achieve that. And also to our TAs, offer a service through BOCES to help the certification and maintaining of that as well. We're not looking to reduce
So
that.
minimal to no impact.
There's some nice to haves in there, but we'll still be able to participate even with a reduction of 10,000 without limiting. If we're going to reduce further, then we're going to have to maybe remove possible coursework that might become available. We have book studies that are available. We might say, okay, well, no book studies through the BOCES, we can offer them in-house possibly, and at a much cheaper cost. We still will have a contractual, at least when it comes to the teachers unit, a $10,000 in-service committee. They have $10,000 to which they work to provide opportunities for in-service. That is not this. This is something different. So that will continue to maintain. That's a healthy committee and it does well to offer opportunities to staff. Exploratory learning, we have some money in here, we just don't use it. It's actually been a place to where we've funded our arts and education overage. Arts and education is a coaster we have available to all our buildings use and love to use. For instance, our Clemens Center trips. We're bringing in a speaker. Corey the Tripper, is that his name? I think I'm right. All those people that come and do school assemblies, right? That's our arts and ed. We are not, at this moment, suggesting a movement on the arts and ed coaster. This exploratory learning is a very similar coaster, and what we've done in the past is we've spent more money often in our arts and ed by providing a lot of cool opportunities, especially post-COVID. It was really important to offer and expand those opportunities. Our field trips, we've used this pot of money to offset excessive costs over there and transfer money to cover that. We have enough money here that we can make this reduction without any change to the arts and ed or any other program. Again, another place in the avenue to explore if we want to look to that arts and ed and some other opportunities, but at this point, we're not there. This is all done safely with very minimal impact. This one's a tough one for me. I've been involved in distance learning since I was in Cornell, and it's a great opportunity if used. We have paid into this coaster for several years at the cost of $20,000 plus, and that's an estimate of $27,000 for next year. Most of that is in the base fee of over $21,000, and the rest is a discretionary to which we pay to have a student take a course. In the years that we've had it, we've used it twice, that I can remember, often for a student that's on a long-term suspension, and instead of being in the classroom. And those who have been in trouble like myself in the past, you know that you go to the office, you get your work, your parents pick up your work, and you know your books, and you take it home, and we have a tutoring center as well. With the academic campus learning and some of the other work we have, I don't think this is a coaster we're going to use. We provide the opportunities in-house, and we certainly have a learning management system to cover that. If we find ourselves in a circumstance to an anomaly, it could happen, then we would just directly contract with the vendor rather than pay a $20,000 base of BOCES to manage the money that we don't use. So it's nothing that BOCES is doing wrong, it's just we don't use the service and we haven't since its inception. See a slight reduction in Canvas. We do have a 24/7 wraparound service, but we have some pretty smart people here. So we have the turnkey that can happen with building capacity in-house. So we're removing the 24/7 connectivity wraparound service. So slight reduction in the Canvas learning management. This one is referring to specific service that is offered in our district. We currently have 3 wonderful individuals that work with us. I'll say them. I mean, Matt and Pam do great work for us over the many years. We are going to continue with this service, just not at the same capacity through BOCES. We're still going to have that opportunity to work with them and work through this FTE coaster. We don't buy personally by service, but we've been lucky enough to have some strong individuals that support the district over the years. We currently have what's called 2.1 FTE. We will have a reduction in that service Again, we can get any individual any given year, but some of those people have been institutions here and are great, and we look to continue to work with BOCES to have them assigned to us. But this is the service we purchased, and we're looking at that a reduction of that to come down to a 1.5 FTE. That would mean that we have an individual scheduled here every day, and then another one scheduled part-time with us. It's a substantial cost, savings of $89,000, and I think it's one that we should look to moving forward. We prioritize what we're doing. It's tough, but we have to consider it. We also associate those individuals who work in the summer with our programming and with our staff and our administration. We can restructure that. This is not completely removing the summer days that are attached to that, but reducing it down to 29. We did grow it up to 29 over the years, 29 days of service. It used to be, I believe, at 15. The last 5-6 years, we've increased it to 29. We're going to go down to 10 days only in the summer, so we'll see a reduction of $14,000 of that particular support during the summer. Again, none of these are we're starting to get close to home. We're starting to hit some items, but these are recommendations that we would make moving forward, and we're not done looking. Any questions about these? Yes.
When you're saying instruction support for summer days, is that, that's not summer school?
No. That's those individuals that support us in technology in the district currently. We also contract them through BOCES to be here in the summer to work with staff throughout. It's and to do background admin work, work with our teachers during curriculum hours, stuff like that. We're just going to reduce the number of days they're made available. So people above that we're reducing down to 1.5 for next year's recommendation, giving them 19 days less next year. In the summer only, it's a summer category.
Okay, and then do we get to see what the original full allocations are for each of these lines? Because I know that I know what you're reducing it by, but I don't know how much we put in it. Do you know what I mean? Like, so for laptops, what's the original allocation? Do you know what? Like for each of the lines, do we get to see that?
It's between $500,000 and $600,000.
$600,000, but we reduced it in our last meeting and we're reducing it further in this particular meeting.
Yeah, we are not doing a line item budget at this point. The line item budget will be compiled once the final budget is assembled, because we will be making notations all over the place and constantly changing. Like instructional summer days, right now, this is what we're reducing. I believe we're going to be reducing all over the place even more. And ultimately, we've got to cover $6.5 million. And you can see, we're trying to look under every rock right now before we get into programming pieces.
Yeah, it's Thompson, to your point, I mentioned a couple of things that we've only carved out a little bit, and I kind of gave, we still got $35,000 here, $20,000 here. There's some, but when it comes to like the distance learning, community schools, that's bringing them down to zero. So you need some aspect, that instructional support, the 1.5 FTE, if you want to do the math, like 89,000 is equivalent to the 0.7. We still have a chunk of money there, and if it starts at 14,000, there's not much left for 10 days. It's $6,000 or $7,000 left there. So of these particular ones, to your point, laptops still have some money yet to do our routine cycle. I do believe we have projected, and Bill, correct me if I'm wrong, 200 laptops still to be purchased. I think out of this line, it's offset by what we're doing with our ARP and our smart schools. That's the only reason why we can recommend this. We need to look further, we will, but technology has become such an integral part of our work. It's tough to give a resource and keep it up to the status we have and then say to do without. It's not a good position to be in. So we have to try to make things strength. If we have to, the work that our techs are doing to be certified so we can do more of the in-house work and hopefully maybe revenue, generate revenue in the future on that would be great. But we have to maintain some level because there's an expectation that we will. So we'll continue to look at laptops and see what we can do, but that pool's getting shallow.
So then if I wanted to see the original allocations for the funds, I guess I would go look at last year's line item budget.
Well, you can look at this year's current financials that you get every month.
Okay, for each of those, yeah, just to see what it is. And then
Yep.
for when we get the budget, when we pass it, we'll get a new updated one of all the different allocations for each of those funds.
For each of the codes.
Yeah,
The budget code in its entirety, there's not the detail listed of everything that comprises that code, but you'll see it if you look at board docs from like April, you'll see the report that the board reviews and adopts.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions on this side? All right, the next list,
Sure. So, one of the things that we're looking at is, positions that, have currently been vacant or will be vacant in the near future. So I'm gonna hit the first one that's a little near and dear to me. The district treasurer, Linda Knight, after being with us since the late 80s, has decided to retire. Sad for me, nay for her. But we have decided, Ann and I have talked, in the spirit of what we're looking at for the budget, we're not going to replace that position. We're going to absorb her duties amongst other numbers within the business office. So we're able to take that money out of the budget as a cost savings measure.
again, looking everywhere, under the rock, as Tom said, for savings and not put efficiencies, we are transferring workloads, and everybody from central office down is working on that, and very important to make this happen. Our high school music position was added by the board of the public a couple years ago. It's gone vacant this past year. It still hasn't been filled or put out. At this point, it's a recommendation not to fill it, and we need to reduce that from for next year. Again, this position was added, it's been vacant all year, and it's one that we would recommend reducing that next year's budget to reset to what we had prior to that addition. So it was about 3 or 4 years ago. The high school physical education, we had someone leave mid-year. We did not fill the position in the current semester, and we have distributed some duties of that person and adjusted some class sizes for the second semester. We believe we can maintain that. We're going to Chris Earl and her team moving to next year on that physical education, not filling that position for next year. And then we do have a clerical position that also has gone unfilled at the high school for several months.
Almost a year.
Almost a year. It's been vacant. Again, duties have been distributed and moved around, each taking on additional things. At this point, we have a recommendation, because they're vacant, we're not, put the livelihood and have those difficult conversations that we don't carry that, and we'll move forward with that. So you can see a savings of $215,000 plus. So that's a big one. These are big ones. These are talking, positions, not people. So I think it's important to stop here and see if there's any questions or clarity on those items.
I was just wondering what the high school music position was. Is that in band, or what was that position?
The position was brought on some additional instrumental and just general music courses offerings were taken on. At the time, our instrumental band had enormous numbers, and it was a way to help with lessons as well as creating the 2 bands and looking towards maybe a 3-band structure. It didn't come to fruition. The numbers of the band have changed since then.
They've dramatically gone down.
And so now I think we're at a point where it was, at that moment in time, with the number of people we had involved in the program, it was appropriate, but now it's a recommendation that the numbers aren't there.
This next one piggybacks a little from the one we talked about the last time. We're moving salaries from for the folks that are paid out of the school lunch fund, or for school lunch, moving them out of the general fund, shifting them over to be paid out of the school lunch fund. So there's a few other small salary items for their contract that we're also able to shift over to the school lunch fund and remove that $9,700 from the general fund without any impact to staff.
Go back and forth on the next few. So part of our work was also to look at, our use of curriculum work, all the great things we've been doing with the creation of our curriculum, particularly Joe in the office. Now is looking at what does that, using that ARP to offset and switch some money over for the summer. This is not a long-term solution, but given the current, a lot of these aren't long-term solutions, because the ideas we're going to have to go into sooner or later, but they're necessary. So we do see that we can recommend this reduction because of the offset of our ARPs, similar to what we were talking about. Technology and still remain strong, and some of the offerings because of that ARP money.
Alright, so this one's kind of a big one. I want to spend some time looking through this one. So we've talked before, we've built in $1 million into the general fund for that big what if when that one particular cash challenge settles. Again, we don't know when, we don't know how much, we don't know if they're all going to settle at once or anything like that, but we know we have to have a plan. So we initially put the $1 million into the general fund to get the first step towards that plan. But as we talked here, and we talked at length amongst ourselves, it's a lot of money to put into the budget in such a tight year for something that may not even be paid in the 24-25 fiscal year. So that's what we wrestle with, given the other reductions we're going to have to make in order to balance this budget. So an option that the board can consider, I removed the $1 million for now. If the board wishes to go the other way, that's certainly your prerogative, but I've removed it for now. An option that the board can consider is we can move money from our ERS reserve at the time we're ordered to pay a refund. So at that time, we'll know exactly how much and we'll know when, and that money can be shifted from the ERS reserve that's projected to have about $2.3 million in it by the end of this fiscal year. Move that money by board resolution from the ERS reserve to the tax cert reserve. So we can dip into our savings to pay that refund versus having to budget it for in the general fund and have to find other cuts and reductions in order to support that $1 million. It becomes a bigger conversation as we're looking at closing that gap within the budget. We always appropriate around $500,000 of the ERS to support our annual ERS payment. So this would take, if it's $1 million, it could be more, it could be less. If it's $1 million, that's a big bite out of that 2.3. And if we typically appropriate that $500,000, going to deplete fairly quickly. So if this is the plan we decide to do, we'll just have to be conscious of if and how much we appropriate from ERS, or how we want to stage ourselves off of it, given our current budget situation. The opportunity to replenish that reserve is probably a few years off. That's a short-term solution that we can provide now for this one particular instance to take some of that stress off the general fund. Any questions on?
How is that ERS fund replenished? Like typically, how would we do that?
So reserves in general are typically replenished through any surpluses that we may realize when we close our books. So at the end of the year, we take our operating surplus or loss that's baked into a very complex fund balance calculation. We always maintain there's a 4% called unassigned fund balance. It doesn't really have to be allocated for anywhere, but it's our rainy day fund, so to speak. So anything above that 4% unassigned that we may realize, that's what we've used in the past to fund our reserves. We funded the tax reserve over the years, the ERS reserve, the capital reserve, which benefited from those surpluses over the years to help offset these capital projects. But again, with the current climate we're seeing now, we're going to be a little ways off before we can right-size this budget and generate those surpluses again.
So the ERS reserve, that's what we use to pay like the settlement for the RNED.
ERS reserve is the employee retirement system reserve. So we have your ERS, the employee retirement reserve is one of the pension payments that we're required to pay. So we can appropriate up to the amount of our annual bill to be in December.
So what?
So the tax reserve is a separate reserve that's specifically for the payment of tax settlements. Board resolution can move money from ERS to tax reserve. That's no allowable move.
What we used, I think I understand your question. I believe at just a past board meeting, we had a resolution to pay off a tax settlement. We used the tax certiorari reserve to do that, or I think we were talking about. we have to be careful on any future. We cannot mention those potential names even if we know that until there's a settlement. But I think that's where you were going, is our most recent settlement, I think either 1 or 2 board meetings ago, there was a resolution that came out of tax certiorari.
Okay. Okay, so to move that money in order to pay for the,
So that transaction is a little different because for this particular payment, we do have the money in the tax reserve. We just need to move it and
Yes.
amend the general fund tax instead. So that's a little bit different than moving reserve to reserve. We're actually using this resolution that we're not talking about is actually moving money from that tax reserve to pay that money out of the general fund. A little bit different.
okay, so what, just recap again for me, for this the tax refund, do we typically set $1 million aside for that?
Typically not, but this is a rather out of the norm challenge that we're looking at. We typically don't see them as high as what we have seen recently for this particular challenge. So this one's unique, and that's why we have to plan for it because of the potential size.
Okay. I'm gonna have to go back and listen to this again because I feel very confused now.
Do you want me to try again?
Yes.
So, we know we have a very large settlement coming, whether it's through independent negotiations between the parties or going to trial for a court order. Recently, they had to go to court for it. 2 years settled, very sizable, $500,000 for 2 years. 3 years still pending. Our tax reserve currently doesn't have enough funds in it to support the magnitude of what those 3 years could be. So knowing it's coming, we have to make a plan or we're going to have a very big problem when we're ordered to pay very limited the money for it. So to plan for it was initially put into the general fund. We have to pay it out of somewhere. But the issue with putting it in the general fund now, we've seen the gap, we know difficult conversations are coming. Adding $1 million for this one-time item is pretty detrimental to other things I think we'd like to keep within the district as far as staffing program. So to find that balance of trying to meet this obligation we know is coming, trying to preserve as much as we can within the district, I'm recommending that we consider dipping into the savings from another reserve that we can legally move for this intended purpose of this tax settlement. That $1 million can come out of the budget. It takes $1 million S&P off everyone's shoulder to try to figure out what to do.
Okay, and we would take the other $1 million out of the retirement one,
Correct.
and then we would have to replenish that retirement after the fact.
If we can.
Right.
We
would
don't
always look at
have to,
replenishing
but
the
we should
reserve.
try to.
Yeah, I mean, we always look to replenish our reserves when those surplus funds are available. So if this situation didn't exist, we would still look for those opportunities to replenish our reserves, just to keep that healthy balance for the times that we need them.
The real issue is,
That helps.
yes, the real issue, so that the board understands, is what Katie was really saying is right now, we have $1 million in all that difference. In other words, what we're short. If we leave it in there, we may never need that $1 million next year. We may need it in 25, 26. But if we leave it in there, we've got to now cut $1 million either out of the budget or potential program or staffing. There's a risk. It could come due next year, but we have a plan that we could go to our reserve to sort of minimize that risk. If we take it out, we are cutting $1 million out without impacting program students for that year. And if it doesn't come due, we made a wise choice. And then we'd have to look for the next year. And then hopefully at the end of the year, we are able to put more potential funding towards tax certiorari.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Along with all the reductions, we've seen in actual laptops. The hardware itself, of course, goes in kind with the cards and some of the cords and ancillaries that go with it. So this wasn't part of the BOCES, it's part of different operational lines we separated out for that sake. So additional $45,000 in savings there. And We work through constant issues with carts and the updating. Anybody that gets a new phone or computer knows the different ports that come with that and the different setups that you have to get based on the new technology. So we're struggling and working through that, and we still feel we can make that reduction due to the other sizable reductions in the hardware itself. Mike and his team working with transportation has looked to say that we can go without a facilities truck at least for this coming school year. It's a little bit of money to give a kick in the can. Certainly we'll need one, but our mechanics and working with Mike and his team, we can get another year out of that. So there's a significant reduction. We want to make sure we went through an exercise. Katie had sent out an email to all department heads and all our building principals saying, okay, time to sharpen your pencils and start looking hard. What are your budgets allowed for, and what are we seeing at the building and department level? Wonderful exercise, great group of people we work with. At our first wave start, reduction of $118,000 was realized in a variety of supplies, equipment, conferences, contractual.
You're going long, Tony, don't worry.
Just thank you to all the building principals and all the department heads for coming together and starting with this first wave. They have been challenged again this past council meeting to look again and to have some tough conversations about their budgets and what are must-haves for next year. Again, it is just moving a year ahead. This is a couple-year issue that, as Thomas said before, 2 to 3 years, even before we realize the ability to go back to getting back to reserves. Things we have to do it out for a little while so that we can, but certainly maintain program. So this is the first wave of what we're looking at. And it's, again, from all our 7 buildings and all our department heads. Questions?
More so a comment. This is not easy. This is not easy to scrub, budgets and look at what's out there. So thank you, and I appreciate you doing that. It hurts a little bit too, right? 2 of my former positions are being when I work for BOCES, but I see the need for it. But thank you for doing this work. Not easy.
No, and as we keep continuing to time, we're not there yet. But we're going to continue to look at these places without effect to people, right? That's like,
I'm grateful for the reserves too. I'm grateful for the work that you've done, that you've built in to our budget so that we can access the reserves when we need them. We're using it at a time when we need it, unfortunately.
All right, to summarize kind of everything we've done over the last couple of meetings, the 215 column is what the budget was when we rolled everything over for our starting point when we first met, started the process. The 314 column incorporates all the modifications that we have made between what you heard tonight and what you heard at the last meeting. So far, we've made a dent in the gap of almost $3.3 million. So again, we got a ways to go, but we've identified a lot of areas at this point that doesn't impact staff or programs, so we're going to keep looking for those opportunities. So an updated, adapted 23-24 budget compared to where we're at today. Right now, we're at 11.6 increase over 23-24, 12.2%. Again, we'll call it that elephant in the room, that debt service. 6.9 million. Again, this was the planned expense to support the capital projects that the community approved. That 15 million is offset by the 9 million we saw on the revenue side is the support from the state, and the rest is supported within that tax levy calculation for the local share that we discussed. So with the new information as of tonight, updated revenue, updated expenditures, using the updated levy figure, the reductions to date, our gap is now down to just shy of 5 million. So we started at 15, we made some reductions. We very early apply the tax levy. We typically hold that toward the end, but I think we all can agree we're going to need at least a sizable chunk of that. Could be less, could be more, depending on what the board decides, but we put it in for now, just for conversation's sake, to show you how that does support our position now. We're going to keep looking for those budget reductions, cross our fingers for that final state budget for some additional state aid. Fund balance use and reserves will be a conversation for later. Again, it's really going to depend on decision for that tax element, what we want to do there, because we've got to keep that $1 million in the back of our mind for any future use of that reserve. Fund balance, again, depending how we balance out this year and how we support this year, we may have to talk about how much fund balance we can or cannot use this year. So that's where we're at now, $5 million gap. Any questions?
Again, not a question, but I'm just going to echo what Aaron said too. I mean, we've been through this many, many years, and I've seen you and your team and the entire administrative staff put together local budgets. And, we've had years where we're adding things, and everybody is coming in saying, "Here's my wish list," and we're able to grant a lot of that. And so, and that feels great. But it's really nice to see how everybody in the district has come together to get creative and really, look deep as to things that we can do. And so, it's definitely not easy, but hopefully it'll just be a little dip, and then we're able to kind of get back to those wish lists in the future. But I think the entire team, and I know everybody who's sitting in this room right now has been a part of that. So, thank you for all that, because it's not easy. It's not easy.
How much fund balance have we incorporated this year?
Here's $1 million.
And reserve funds?
6.5
million?
So 1.6 between the two. That's
We were actually trying to wean off of that over the fact that when we came in 2015, we were up to 6.6 million, and we've finally gotten down to try to get off of it, but now we're going to have those issues.
And what's the total amount of fund balance right now?
Total amount unassigned is 3.7 million. We have the $1 million appropriated. Projections, at this point for current fiscal year, we're likely going to be into that 4%. Like we're looking at here this year is just this challenge.
Thank you.
And it's important to note on what Katie's saying is, this isn't just about last year, it's also about this year, because our health insurance and inflation is still hitting this year's budget. And that's one of the discussions on the principal, right? 800,000 sort of bites into that. It won't take care of it, because our health insurance are projected right now potentially another $2 million over our budget. That's because of the use of it. Well, if we take 800 off, we still have to come up with 1.2 million. So those are some decisions that unfortunately nobody would ever make. Other questions real quick before I start on this?
First, I would just reiterate the comments of the fellow board members about the hard work that's gone into this, and thank you for that. Obviously, it's still concerning to see, despite all of that, and using the tools that we typically use, we still have a significant gap. So I guess I'm wondering if and I know a lot of work is going into continuing to try to reduce that, but it feels like we may end up at a point where we're having to deal with some difficult questions. Okay, maybe I should just think. I'm just kind of wondering what you anticipate as far as that goes, and the timeline, so that we have, the appropriate time to sort of consider that and seek input, et cetera.
So the reason I'm here is because at the last board meeting we talked, you can see this gap closing option.
I think we had a couple comments, I think it was Mr. Johnson and Mr. Christmas in regards to the final potential 2% tax levy decision. As an administration, we need to know, like we'd asked, what are your thoughts on whether or not we're at 2%? Do you want us to go under 2%? You don't need to know yet if you want us to go over 2%. But I kind of need to know because we've got a lot of work. Because every bit that you go under the 2%, say you say, hey, we want to be at 0%, we've got to cut $6.4 billion additional to 4.9. If you say we want to be at 1.9, every tenth of a percent is roughly about $50,000, 10%. So like if you went 1.9%, we've got to add $50,000 to the 4.9. That's pretty much the long and short of it at this point. So we asked it last week to have some discussion. I leave that to the board right now because we need that answer. Because we are going to probably need an extra Board of Education meeting on April 4th. The tentative for April 11th is now a must. Because we have no choice but to get the budget done by April 18th. So those are the recommended dates. The board should plan on that. You need to change your schedules because this is going to get bumpy after the next presentation. Sort of the Christmas remark. We have tried to look at every place we could for the first two. The next one is our curriculum, professional development presentation, and our instruction is always our last one. Between that one and the fourth, we have to significantly address the staff so that we're at least in the range of where we might be able to be funded. If we can't get there, then we can come back and ask the board, do you consider challenge or do you want us to cut even further? The hard part is we've tried to stay staff strong and program strong as much as possible. I think you are already seeing that number will not make it possible any longer. Now we must be as delicate as possible, but educationally sound and operationally sound. So that's what the discussion point. If you look at the other tools up there, we know budget reductions, we're going to be bringing more. We need time to work through that and have conversations. I've asked already for all the unit leaderships to meet with me once before because they know what this issue is. I am putting out an email tomorrow to set up another meeting because we've been trying to approach that we're all part of the solution, even though the solution is not going to be the best or the easiest. But maybe they have an idea. If you have an idea, please share it with me, either here or send me an email, and our team will consider it as much as possible. The big thing, as I have to say, is we still must operate. We are trying to take a balanced approach. You've already seen, we're doing things at the central office. There's going to be every area, even the Board of Education is going to have to take some reductions. You don't get paid, so it's not a reduction like that. But our memberships are something. We can still do the same work, but not pay the premium price. So we will be looking at that at the next time. Because at the next meeting, we're going to start looking at some possible program reductions. That doesn't mean staffing, but programmatic. And we have to take some time to put those up as Tony gives his presentation. However, the step after the next presentation, the budget has been presented, and we need final decisions on different things that we've already put up. Everything we put up already is a must. It's not really, do we have a choice? Those are must, because everything else are going to be possibly considerations, depending on your decision at the end on what we do with the tax levy. So I'd open it up right now to what are your considerations of being at 2%? Because if you say we're at 2%, that number gets locked in now. And then if you say you want to go over it, that's a future discussion. If you say today we're going under, that number will get locked in and that gap gets changed, and that's what we need to be. So I sort of set my piece to try to get there. I want to open it up to the board. Did that help?
It's serendipity. It's exactly what I was wondering. So So it wasn't planned.
Yeah. So one last thing is the additional state aid. I've been doing this for 37 years, whether as a teacher, an administrator. I have a hell of a lot of experience dealing with Albany. I used to work there. This is the first time ever in that same amount of time that both House budget and the Senate budget in New York State has absolutely been identical in what they are fighting the governor against. It's usually one will take one side, one will take another side, and the governor takes their side, and then they hammer it out, and we usually lose. This is the first time the Senate and the Assembly have rejected every single educational cut the governor has said, and said reinforce the foundation. What does that mean to us? We won't see major amount of money like St. Arnold's, like Hammondsport lost $1 million to Hammondsport. That's like a 20-30% reduction. We saw $1 million add because we've already had our St. Arnold's taken away. So ours is state aid, but the governor reduced the Constitution and statutory increase in state aid of 3.9% down to 2.1, which that's the additional state aid. That 69 is not what I'm talking about. We are potentially owed, according to the governor and the state's requirement from last year's law, almost an additional $500,000. That makes a difference. I don't know if it will be traded away. I was in Albany last week, and I'm probably going to have to make more trips. But that is a piece that normally both are at odds. We won't get to this. They both said, no, it's going back up to the 3.9, and that's unusual. And that's good. They also did something that nobody ever thought they would. They said they're going to guarantee everybody at least a 3% increase in aid. That probably won't play out for us. So our best hope is that they stick with that foundation aid moving it forward. That would provide us some additional money. But even at that, say we got 500, we're still at 4.48. And here's the thing, that goes to 5.98 if you are not willing to consider $1 million for the tax credit. So I think those are the two discussions we kind of need. And the third one is the principal thing, we need to work on that now. So those are really the three things: tax cap, tax cert, and principal. Over the floor. Yes.
So I think based on the slide earlier, the tax levy change at the 2% limit is like 14.7 or something like that increase.
Yeah.
This is probably a way too early a question for Katie and all of you, but is there any way to calculate what the increase to the tax on true is going to be?
I'm going to reach out next week to the county for preliminary assessments. They're early, but they're decent-ish this time of year, so it at least gives us a base point to start looking at. And then every few weeks I ask for updates as they change. They have until May 1st to lock in assessment, so the closer we get to our adoption in April, it tightens up a little, but I usually start around mid-March getting those preliminary numbers. So I will have a baseline projection. We'll see, what growth there might be, what equalization rates are tentatively looking at, and things like that.
I mean, Katie, we've always had, Katie is very conservative along with Ann and her team, so we get close. Usually whatever they say, it's usually better in August. The hard part is tax assessment rolls are not finalized until actually March 31st. And I know I bugged the hell out of Katie starting April 1st, and then she bugs the hell out of the tax assessors between them as much as possible. And ultimately, she'll give her best guess at April 18th, but we will be starting to look at that as best as possible.
So it's too early to give, or irresponsible at this point to hazard a guess on that percentage increase.
It's preliminary, yeah. It'll give you a feel, if we want to talk about, under the levy, at the levy, or the levy, that would at least give you an idea of what the rate, how it would change based on the information today, but with the understanding that the assessment data is very early.
Like, remember earlier we talked about I think it was 22, 23 where we went out at 2.97, but the rate went down by 7%. I think her estimate was it would be down by like 0.069. And then all of a sudden, come August, it dropped by another 7%. We never expected that. But they were very conservative because there was growth, but we weren't necessarily getting all the best estimates at that point. So that's what we've done. Just like last year, we go out that we went out a certain amount, but we knew it wouldn't. I think we were estimating that it was going to come in at 68 cents per thousand, and it came in like 38 cents per thousand. But again, conservative. It gets tighter and tighter as we get closer to the date that we have here.
But in our budget rules, we do an estimate in there.
Yep.
So at that point, you'll have at least enough data to.
Yes. So hypothetically, say you went out of tax levy at 10%, and our estimate said, and I'm just using a number, the estimate says the rate is going to go up by 7%. Right? People will say 10%, 7%, and they'll confuse the two. So we try to give them that potential in like cents. In other words, it should go up by 22 cents per thousand, or $22 per 100,000. And we've been doing that for the past 5 years, so I do think people are more.
Because I'm sure, I know, you know where I'm going with this, is that 14 is a huge number,
Yeah.
it's a big number. 7 or something single digit, or, you know, in that neighborhood is more palatable and more in line with inflation. So, and especially for like newer board members and the public, you know, we do have the opportunity to present one budget. If it happens to go down, we do have a second opportunity to present a second budget, or just to adopt a contingency at that point. So one way forward would be go at the full amount allowed in the law, even if it's a 14% or whatever that increase happens to be, with hopefully a tax on true increase in single digit more palatable. Try and maintain program staff to the best of our ability, and then let the public decide on that, and of course, we can support that. So I guess because we have that second possible budget vote in our back pocket, possibly, I think I'm okay with going with the full levy amount for your needs and first go around. On the tax certiorari, $1 million amount, I think what you explained makes sense. If we've got another bucket of money to take that from, I'm in favor of that. And you described the
Principal.
Yeah, you described the benefits of that, and I think that makes some sense, and that the amount of repayment over 15 years, I think you said, it doesn't sound like it's a lot additional, so I guess right now I'm for the full levy amount, removal of $1 million from the general fund, and principal change.
Thank you. Aaron?
I agree with what Doug said. I also think it's important that we share with the public what voting down the budget means, and what a second, putting forward a second budget means, and really what a contingency budget means. I think people need to understand the ramifications of that, of both of those options on children, staff, and learning.
I will add one more thing too. The ramifications of the contingency on the community is the evaluation of potential assessments, other things in the long term. It doesn't mean everybody happens right away, but that impact, even though we are not allowed to say, hey, the school district budget raises assessments or lowers, unofficially everybody knows where your schools are at, is where your community is.
Right. And I've lived in this community, and I worked in this school when we were under a contingency budget. And I can tell you, it is not something that this community wants.
I think that was, if I'm not dating or saying, I think the last time the contingencies were is 6 out of 9 budgets between 1990 and 2000
Correct.
were failed, and the board was having trouble getting a budget.
Correct. And it is not a place that we want to be as a community, or for our teachers, or really for our kids. That is not where we want to be for our kids. I speak not just from, being a community member, but from being an educator, being a parent, and being in this district where that happened. And we do not want that to happen. So.
Thank you. Others? Ms. Davis?
100% agree. I'm in favor of going on, we're allowed to go out for tax levy right now. I would not be in favor of reducing that. I'm also in favor of your recommendation for that $1 million, and then also for the as well. So, again, I think very creative ways of, helping us to get to more of a balance. I agree. I think more the, once we continue to get through the process, the more we can communicate what we're at risk of losing, right? The better, because I agree. It's not the best interest for our kids. It's not the best interest for our staff or our community. So hopefully people listen and they come out.
And that's why we videotape and put everything up and get information out. I will say from our exit surveys, our budget newsletter is the #1 communicating path through it. And I know Stan is already working on many things to try to make sure we have to increase the size of that.
So I would be in favor of using the tax cert fund, $1 million. I would be in favor of the plan Katie proposed on the debt service and how to use that. My question for clarification purposes, if I look at the chart there, the current gap is 4.98 million with your plans already included there, right? The $1 million?
Yes.
All right, so all of that's in place.
Everything you saw tonight and the last time has
Okay.
been incorporated, yeah.
So my question then is, if we go out, because the indication has been we might be in favor of going out at the full 2% tax cap with whatever that levy is. If I'm reading that accurately, are we $1.4 million to the good then?
No.
That 6.4 is incorporated already, so that $5 million gap includes.
Oh, okay,
Yes.
all right. So you got to, even if we went out at the full point,
$5 million more.
we have to find 5 million more. Okay, now I understand.
Sorry, I was looking for the laser.
Okay, now,
Yeah, Mr. Conklin, if you look
I
at
get
this
it
number
now.
right there, just for the public, this number of revenue includes this number at this point.
okay.
If
I'm
this
with
goes
you.
down, that number will change and that gap changes.
Okay, I'm with you now.
Others? Mr. Chris?
As I said in the last meeting, I'm very supportive of using the max that we're allowed to use. I think you laid out very well in the presentation that unfortunately the circumstances we're in is not a function of fiscal irresponsibility. It's the sort of lagging inflation now kind of cascading almost like a wave, and it's the decreases in state funding. And obviously the district administration is being as creative as possible in trying to make the budget gap as small as possible. So I think we have to use every tool at our disposal before we get into the hard decisions about staff and programs. And so I'm in favor of all three of the things that you asked about.
Could I ask one other question? So,
Sure.
if it comes down to trying to educate the public, is there a way in your next presentation to say, all right, we're looking at these potential cuts, and maybe the public wants to save one of those. So if we keep that, the tax rate will be A. If we don't keep it, or the tax levy will be A. If we don't keep it, the levy will be B. So we get a sense of trade-offs of levy versus program and what that might be.
You are thinking like an administrator now, because no
That's
matter
scary.
what, we will be getting there. It won't be at the next meeting, but I think you'll start seeing some of that as we build on the 4th and definitely by the 11th.
Okay.
But ultimately, Mr. Conklin, you hit the nail right on the head. Our job is to give you recommendations. This is the hardest job of the board.
Trade-offs.
Is once we give you the recommendations, we're going to have them prioritized. You're going to be able to change those priorities. We're going to probably tell you the ones that we made, don't even mess with. They're so high up, you aren't going to be able to change. Has anybody ever seen The Price is Right? Okay. Does anyone know the rangefinder game? That's where you got a car, how much it costs, and say the range is between $19,000 and $38,000. And they give you a $1,000 shaded area. And that thing starts going doo, 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 and going up. And you've got to push the button to say stop. In a way, we're going to be doing that rangefinder game, but it's not for a prize. It's for what is the board going to settle at. And before that range goes up, you'll see our priority order. The board may have some different priority orders. Ultimately, these are your final decisions. We're going to give you the recommendations. We're going to tell you the pros and cons. But if you say move this up and it moves up and something else moves down, that's our obligation to do the will of the board. But, now I'll get right to you. The hard part is, that's your responsibility. All we can do is give that recommendation on building. That's what we're doing now. So by the 11th, you're going to start, I hate to say it, having to deal with that. I think on the 4th, you're going to hear it and deal with it because we're going to have to start making some very difficult positions on that chart. And then my administrative team that's here, we will talk to the units as well. My executive team will try to get it into the final sort of layers. And it will probably be even deeper than that gap. So say we got 4.9, we may put up $6-7 million. Because ultimately at the end, if we don't pass whatever budget goes out, you can either put it up again and say, oh, community, put it up or you get a contingent, which I would never advise against because if they voted it down once and you put it up, they sort of get mad. You could go lower. It's just like the board at a later time could say, hey, we don't want to lose that. So we're going to challenge, so the second time, we'll go to that, and if you don't want the 2%, guess what, you get contingent. But people need to know the impetus of what their decision will play out. And I think that's sort of what you're saying. So in a way, we're going to be building exactly what you said, and then saying, this is where the 2% cap is, this is where a 1% challenge is, this is where a 2% challenge is, this is where a 1% or a 0.5% reduction is, and this is what we would have to reduce just to get down to that point. And we need that ready because we need it for that meeting, but if a budget goes down, we got to use that same device for any rebuild. We only have 2 weeks to put that final one on. So good question, very good, thank you. Others? Here, sorry.
I don't know, this might be a silly question, but I'm just trying to think outside the box here. Do we have any revenue earning opportunities that we can pursue or look at as a district?
We are trying with grants as much as we can. It's kind of hard for districts to make revenue.
I know.
That's the hard part. Our revenue is federal, our revenue is state. I mean, one of our revenue is athletics, but it just goes, it doesn't change the budget, it just gets going back into the general fund. And we've been trying to treat our community because the return on their investment has been what they have been doing. And the return on their investment is their properties. So that's always the hard part. But I know Stacy and everybody, we are trying to do it. Katie?
One thing to add that you can do and have been doing is taking advantage on the positive side of the current interest market environment. And is down in the weeds, working really hard, analyzing every bit of cash that we have, our cash flow cycle, finding those areas where we can invest lots of money.
Right.
2 month note, 6 month note,
Yes.
9 month note, like really staging that cycle to get those interest earnings coming in.
How much have we raised so far this year just by doing that, which is policy driven?
Right. Those are the kind of opportunities that I'm glad we're looking at, but, I mean, there's risk in everything, right? You know, I mean, that's the frightening part, is there's that risk there, but, you know, what are safe risks that we can take that can possibly be an opportunity for us? You know, have we done a site evaluation, a district evaluation? I'm sure you have, looking at our facilities and our resources. Are we able to rent part of our buildings for something? Is there
We rent what we can,
to
but,
that?
yeah, we rent what we can, but that's not necessarily equating to everything. The hard part is we don't have as many rooms because we're in construction too. Yeah, I think we have 12 rooms that we're renting right now.
That's from both cities, but we're kind of landline for our own needs right now. We still rent Broad Street.
We sold
But
that.
we sold that, a couple other things. We had to have space like that that's really useful and our phone. We just,
And for a couple of years, when we do consolidate and go into Center Street, we will have some rooms that we will probably rent out there because we're still going to get paid for almost 15 years on that building. And the longer we have students in, the more we get in. And that is just with BOCES, it would not be for our students.
Right, it was worth the brainstorm. Thank you. for
Very,
entertaining.
that's what we're asking for. Others? Katrina?
Yeah, I just want to make sure that I'm understanding all of the different, the money. So, okay, so I went back to the other part of the slide where, and it was probably from a couple meetings ago, the one that says the salaries. So all of these increases were like the salaries going up almost 3 million, and the benefits going up almost 4 million, and the debt service going up almost 7 million. Are those, all of those items are the,
This is the
it's
current
exactly what we're
amount.
talking about for our,
Yeah.
what we need to figure out. Okay, so at this point in time, and we can't change that because we have to pay these things no matter what. Or are we saying we're allowed to change what those numbers are in those boxes?
What are you talking about? Which
What do you mean by change?
Well, so it said, for the summary of the budget expenditures,
Yeah, right there.
yeah. So are you asking us to find changes within that dollar change amount where it's like the 1.8 million, the 3 point, yes.
That is the year-over-year budget. So salaries, for example, that 1.8, that includes obligated contractual salaries for all of our district staff. That is the large component, that we employ 700 plus people. So the salary benefit side of an operation our size is significant. We have made reductions in that line already. That you see the last couple of presentations, we're going to keep looking. But as Dr. Douglas said, we're going to start having more challenging conversations about each of these items coming up later.
Okay, and so we are changing these lines potentially, is what we're talking about.
So they have changed since we first met already.
Yep, okay.
They're going to continue to change until the board adopts middle of April.
Like right here, this budget is 24, 25. This is what we have in our budget right now. You really can't change this much at all. Benefits, unless you're willing to reopen contracts, you're not going to change much of that. Salaries, they're all contractually, you're not going to change that. But are there changes that could affect salary and benefits? That's what we're talking about that are going to be the difficult challenges in the future. If we reduce staffing, these numbers change. This is the first priority of any district they must have. BOCES services, depending on special needs and other services in education, that's contractual that we are going to have to pay. Unless we cut the whole BOCES out, we're going to have to pay it. If equipment and supply, that's operations. If we have a contingent budget, anything in equipment is automatically removed.
that helps you get down. Transfer to capital, that's basically our capital outlay, and notice we're already cutting $1 million. We're not going to do the annual projects at this point. So as far as what the board has, you have staffing and programming these two, you have equipment, and maybe some BOCES services that are outside mandatory requirements for education. That's really all that you have. And in the community, that's why when people say if you're looking at a budget, you're really only talking about maybe 10 to 15% of the budget that you're giving back. Except unless you change what you want.
So what exactly is the debt service category then?
Principal and interest payment on our short-term debt, long-term debt, and our bus debt.
Okay, so that would be like the capital projects and the buses
That's
that we
all,
purchased.
it's all construction that was already approved by the district and by the vote.
Same as a loan, right? Principal and interest payments paid over X amount of years.
Okay, so that's what we can't change.
You can't change that because you're already indebted and the voters have already authorized it.
Okay, but we can change it a little bit with what you were saying earlier with
Short-term notes, we have some fluctuation.
trying to
Big swings, I would not recommend.
reduce the payments over the length of time. Okay.
Others? Ms. Sudell? Oh.
I am in favor of all of the recommendations. Thank you very much.
When talking about the tax levy, one thing we haven't talked about yet that would be helpful to the board in weighing the numbers that we're seeing is that we have not discussed how we want to appropriate the debt service reserve funds. We typically appropriated, I think this year, $700,000 to use our savings to offset the levy amount. But that's not yet included in that 14.7%. So
That's one of our last tools.
So it doesn't bring down the cap. It's a wash between the levy and using that reserve, but it does bring that levy percentage down. That's what that tool is there.
Hypothetically, say we use debt service to bring the levy down, it's still at the 2% level, but say I'm just using numbers. Say we're at 14.74, and say we were able to bring it down to 10.74. I don't know if we can. Say we were. That's bringing it down 4 percentage points, or roughly $2 million. Okay, we still have to cut that amount. But that 2% is now 10%. If you were willing to go out at 2% at 14 and save $2 million worth of debt, that's that discussion at the end that you're going to have to struggle with. But that's that rangefinder game. I hate to say it's not a game, but that's what we're talking about. That's where the board's going to struggle and have to make that decision. Whatever your ultimate decision is, we are going to bring it to you on the 18th for board approval. Because ultimately, we recommend the budget, the board approves the budget for the community to consider. Once the community weighs in, and if they say it's approved, it becomes the administrative budget to work on for the next year. And then the cycle starts all over again, and we wait until next December, January, February to see what the governor's going to do to us again. Hopefully be kind. Other questions? It's a lengthy presentation, but we still have more.
Just 2 items. Good question.
There you go.
As we talked about, you mentioned last time and then continue now, taking in, as Danny said, that tidal wave of inflationary and healthcare and what we do in today's, this fiscal year, as well as how we manage next fiscal year. You heard me talk about ARP and the smart school to make this happen. So what I'm about to present, we would consider strong recommendations to move forward with, because it makes everything else happen and gets at least to that number. We have a real allocation of unspent money. Again, money is unspent because of, for a variety of reasons, mainly because positions weren't hired right away. There's a good chunk of this money. Actually, one of those is just shifting from one code to another. It's not even a reduction or it's just a movement of funds from a line to a line. So unspent money, and what's left in our ARP, goes into continuation of the summer learning academy for this next school year. It will remain in the grant fund. It is not double booked. If we want to run it in the summer of '25, we're going to have to budget for it next year this time. Okay, but right now, we can run it with this money being moved. It also includes just picking up the cost of positions that are already in the grant and were approved in the grant. So where we might have just picked up a partial FTE, we're going to pick up a full FTE. Where we might have picked up full FTE, we're going to pick up some benefits. It's not creating positions, it's taking already created positions and adding to the cost of that position. Maintain it and try to keep it. So that's for this fiscal year and thinking about what we can do next. Additional tutoring center costs. One particular grant talks about some of the after-school criteria for it. It's a small piece of the overall puzzle. It's $100,000 in an after-school grant that was given to us in this particular back in 2020, 21, 22. So it's just reallocating that to ensure we continue that tutoring center after school. And lastly, you saw me mention offset. We can reduce our operational budget $100,000 if we supplement. We already had curriculum work in ARP. We're not creating a line, we're just adding more back to it, taking from places where it went unspent. This is the plan that is no longer is going to move forward and be accounted for, so we can capture this, and we would go forward and submit that with Stacy's help to New York State for approval after this board meeting. But we've received nothing back, no questions about the presentation and the information put out. And I guess now's that opportunity for the last wave of commentary on what we could do with it as an instrument.
Just a curiosity, how many students participate in the summer program, and do we have an idea of how many students are utilizing the tutoring center?
So after the summer program, we invited over 215, I think, elementary principals. That sound about right? And it's well over 200 people, students were invited. I think in the end, we just had, 1 year we had like 96, the next year we had 108 or something, give or take. So unfortunately, not everybody takes advantage of it, but we did have some good showing for that. So about 108 K through 6 students. Very heavy in the primary usage. We only had a handful of the higher ones. The tutoring, this is primarily for our students that are out, not in school. This is that tutoring center that provides for that particular service by New York State. What happened last year, I believe it was last year, New York State increased the hourly requirement for equivalency, and this allows us to pick that up and meet that expectation, and then we have to budget for it appropriately moving into next school year. So it's a way to offset current costs that were added by New York State as a mandate, of course.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I do have questions. I'm sorry, I'm trying to look them up because I tried to email questions. So it says that we engage the stakeholders, and is the way that we engage stakeholders, was that just from this meeting, from the last meeting to this meeting? Is that the engagement? Or is this the
In part
engagement
for this amendment, but it's under the spirit of all the previous engagements prior to that.
Can I
Because we're not creating any
what you're
additional.
reading from Katrina?
My
Because I've noticed since September, you read your phone, and I'm just curious
That's where I
what...
wrote my questions down.
So they're your notes?
Yeah,
So then can you share them with the board?
I did. I emailed them to you guys beforehand today and to Dr. Douglas ahead of time. I
So
emailed
these
them.
are all of the questions you
Yeah.
submitted to us?
Yeah.
Okay.
So again, the stakeholder goes back to the very well-responded survey we did when we first had the ARP grant and the CIRSA grant. ARP is where it was applicable with 1,400 respondents. This is just continuing on that same spirit of what was in that grant, the continuation. We have to spend this last little pool of money, and so providing stakeholder groups is, we brought it to the council, we brought it to community engagement, committees, a variety of different people, and it's to spend or move around the money that's left over.
Okay, and it says in the amended document that's up on the agenda tonight, it says that the board had conducted a hearing in one of the boxes that enables the stakeholders to respond to the preliminary plan. Is that the original plan?
Yeah, preliminary would have been the first
From the very first one, and so that already happened a long time ago?
Yeah, preliminary, yeah.
That might be smart school fund, is it? Or are we talking about?
Well, we had, I don't know if it's called preliminary, but when we first submitted our ARP money, we had to show that stakeholder engagement, and we showed through the use of that. There might be a mix over between the two there, but we still did this.
Yeah, I was wondering about the smart schools. This one is for.
Oh, so if you don't mind, I don't discount the questions, but we really want to make sure we move forward with this thing. And Smart School is going to be next.
I just want to clarify that
Yeah.
smart schools require, it has the public hearing.
So we won't go there just yet.
No, I just wanted to say, if in case she was, there was a.
So is there any questions? We'll go to ARP and then we can go to Smart Schools.
Okay, so all of this money that we see up here, is that all of the amount of money that we're going to have to plan for in the future for the Summer Learning Academy? Like, what's that biggest cost for us for next year? You were saying that
Yes,
now the funds
so
are going to
at
be done,
full
so how much
throttle.
are we going to have to pay?
Great question. I mean, if we want to maintain that program at what I'll call full throttle, I mean, we have very low teacher-to-student ratio. We offer math intervention. I think we have a librarian attached. We're looking at a physical education teacher attached. So high level, more than what we think too. I think the number came in at a ballpark of about $70,000 price tag. So moving this money around, we'll keep it at that full allocation. We're going to take some of our 20% of our lost instruction money, some of that ESSER3, and we're going to put it into that summer line. Because the summer line only has $5,000 left in it. We have to increase that significantly to cover costs for the Summer Learning Academy. So one of the amendments is to support that program. We want to carry it next year this time during budget conversations, because it'll be the 25-26 school year. I'll come back with a recommendation to plan to Tom and the board of how we still do it well, but maybe not at the level that this grant is affording us.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions on ARP? We will go through the submission. This serves as the purpose of officially starting the time frame for our Smart Schools Bond Act plan. The preliminary plan is in the board, the financials of the key section there. This is just a preliminary. It starts the clock on moving forward with that plan. It'll be posted with a 30-day opportunity by the requirements of that plan. And then a public hearing will serve as the board meeting for people to come and talk if they'd like to about the expenditure of this remaining $241,000 of that $2.9 million for that 2014. Again, let's spend it out to take advantage of the current situation and to offset some technology needs, and therefore making savings in the operational budget. So this is our recommendation. What we do have to follow through and do after the board does have to approve this at either 4/18 or 5/23. We put either of those dates because it's the public hearing. We do have something that we should consider. We have to give it due diligence to wonder, should we do that? And then we can bring it back to the 23rd. So depending upon the public feedback we get. So we'll have that preliminary plan moving to its official plan, and without any real substantial feedback and no changes, then we'll recommend it to PET for official approval to move forward with the submittal to New York State. What's being approved tonight is simply the preliminary to get it posted, to get it started for stakeholder feedback. So 171 laptops and 28 reports. Most of those are going to the elementary, if I recall. Yes.
And this will fully exhaust the 2012 Smart School Bond for at least us. I know everybody else is not graduating.
Yes.
I know there's a plan. Can you outline how we're going to communicate this to the community?
This,
And
yeah.
share feedback.
Yeah, so this starts that. We had a newsletter that went out to families. Was it part of the last week before? I can't remember that. Just put it on the radar.
It was right before, it was
The last
the week
meeting, right?
before the last board meeting, because I had that question asked about ARP as well. And that was our initial, and you announced it, so it's already been sent out almost, I think, 3 weeks ago.
So we'll get it again out in a generalized community message, or excuse me, to at least our parent groups especially, and then it's been at their individual committee meetings, and Stacy's job to ensure we meet that threshold of New York State and meet the auditing requirements there, so we can't do that. So that's why we have Stacy on board to make sure we're checking those boxes. New York State is good with our plan. We don't want to submit something and have it rejected. That would be a waste of everyone's time.
If I may ask, didn't we just put it out a second time with the play information and communication just the other day?
Yes.
So a second full mailing has gone out as well. You should, if you have a child, you should have received it.
Tony, if I can add, so we put that out on February 28th and March 8th. And this is all, we're also required to do notification through the local media and on the district website.
Thank you. Yes.
At least,
There's a legal notice that
at
goes out.
least 2 weeks prior to bringing the final plan to the board. So we will do that prior to the April meeting. So it will go through official notice.
You might recall,
Local
you
media.
mentioned the antiquated nature of this old grant. You have to post to the newspaper 14 days prior as well. But we're doing it, of course, updated through email and technology and in-person meetings with a variety of different groups.
And the real funny thing is, see 2014, 2012, remember I talked about the budgets and the two house budgets? The governor put in Smart Bond 2 for this coming election season for electric vehicle buses. So if it took them that long just to do 2 million, can you imagine how long it's going to take to do our electric vehicles? It's just a point of humor because we've been out here for 2 hours. So sorry.
So again, with the pre-approved plan tonight and the board agenda, we'll get those clock ticking on the rest of those requirements and then look for the board to officially approve it.
Question?
All goes back to making sure we at least get to that, at least the start of 4.98. So those assumptions are being built in.
Any questions on ARP or Smart? Ladies and gentlemen, this sort of brings to the end our presentation. Future meetings are Wednesday, March 27th, Board of Education regular meeting at 6 p.m. On Thursday, April 11th, but we will update this to, we will also have one on April 4th at 6 p.m. Thursday, April 11th, we will be taking off if needed. We are going to need it. There will be just an administrative budget approval that we have for April 17th, and then our final Board of Education meeting on the budget, because we have to tentatively present the plan for the board to consider and make final determination and approval of the budget that night, and then we head off into the 19th, and then the school district is off for a week, which is Katie's quiet week of getting all of this wrapped up. Because I'm screwing you up. But those are the future dates that we have. Any questions? No?
Thank you.
We will have this on your board update.
I just want to get it in the calendar.
Yes,
And we'll be adding April 4th.
we will be adding a report on this week's update, which comes out tomorrow. Other questions?
I think that says Wednesday the 18th. I think it's.
Oh, it is Wednesday the 18th. Thank
Is
you.
is it Wednesday the 17th or Thursday the 18th for April?
Let's go.
Yes, the 18th should say Thursday, so we will correct.
Oh, okay, so we're gonna have, oh, okay.
I couldn't tell who's
Oh, I already have the
Sorry.
17th written down. Okay, so it's the 18th, okay.
Yep. I was looking at everybody, I couldn't see anybody talking, I'm like, where's it coming from? It sounded like that.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anyone else?
Okay, I'm using my executive authority to call a 10-minute recess, get up, walk around, and then we'll come back and start. All right, so I don't know, I have to make an official declaration that the recess is over. But we're going to move on to Section 6, Finance Items for Action. And before I start with the normal, can I have a motion? I just want to make a couple of introductory items, break maybe protocol in regards to this. Katrina, we are all in receipt of your email, which contained many questions. In preparation for the discussion to come, I have some preliminary thoughts. I found the questions to be overly broad in scope, and maybe I found them overly broad in scope because I was frequently confused about what documents you were referencing and what section of the document initiated your question. So at least for me, in the future, please cite the agenda item number, the page number of the document, and the section on the page which caused your concern. One of your questions singled out a school district employee by name. Be advised, we will not travel down that road tonight, as it is a violation of board policy to discuss district employees in public session. And I will shut that question down. So now, I need a motion for 6.02 through 6.24. Curiosities, discussions, comments?
So I just had some questions about it, and I did try to email them over. I saw on the report, on the auditor claims report, that we still have purchases that were made without purchase order approvals being completed first.
No, that's the area I will not allow to be discussed. I will not allow that area to be discussed.
I'm not talking about any person, I'm just talking about,
I will not allow that area to be discussed.
okay, it says that the corrective actions, it says listed none. I believe
Point
that.
of order?
I believe we're supposed to have corrective actions filled out in those boxes.
So the corrective action on the things audit report is what can be done at the time the check is issued.
Okay.
So, you see the ones sometimes that, incorrect remit address. It was corrected before the check was issued. As far as they're confirming purchase order, there's that much to be done at the time the check is issued. That process is already done. The check needs to go. So as far as the claims audit report goes, there's nothing to report as any type of corrective action to complete the process of issuing the check. There is a process, however, that either myself or the purchasing agent does follow up with those issues to kind of dig in, why this happened, what we do, make sure this one doesn't happen again.
Okay, so so the none is just talking about in that
What can be done
moment.
at that moment of time to correct whatever problem there is to get the check out the door. Yes.
Oh, okay, because basically you want to just make sure that you're making your payments, is that the idea? Okay.
So it's not like a wrong invoice number or a wrong check number that can be corrected before the check is mailed. It's just a process that wasn't followed the way it was supposed to, so the check can proceed, we just need to deal with it internally.
Okay, thank you. And then what is the T and A fund?
Trust and agency?
Okay. Sorry.
Trust and agency, I believe, and if I'm correct, it's just a pass-through, whenever used for payroll now. They used to have other purposes, the rules around it have changed, so it's really just a pass-through for some money.
Thank you. Thank you. Oh, I still have more questions, I'm sorry, because we're still on here. In the treasurer's report, because this is all of them, there was the line adjustment, and it said like 1,085.52 on the adjustments. If you go into the revenue and expense report.
What page?
Are we talking?
Oh, no, treasurer's report, sorry about that. And the treasurer's report, and I'm going to, I tried to have it open here. If you look at the adjustments right there on the first page, it's like, a lot of them are zero. What does that adjustment represent? Is that just the difference between what the bank balance was and the subtotal? Do you see where it says $1,085.52?
So you typically see adjustments for the December one for some payroll items for W-2s to be issued due to the timing of payroll cycles and the issuance of the W-2 for December 31st. So it's not uncommon
Okay, so that's what those, and then I think I had a couple of other adjustment questions in the same thing, and that's just what that was for. The December, because it's the end of the year, so like the computing of it. Okay, and then I think you answered some of the questions as far as like the reserve balance with Aaron earlier today, that we do take some of the reserve money in order to make some of the notes, right, to create, do we take that money to create notes to get earn interest on it?
We've invested reserve money, yes.
Okay. Okay. In regards to the high school extracurricular report, what happens to the money after a class graduates? What do we
Class
do
is
then?
distributed according to finance committee, and those funds will either be elected to be dispersed in a way that all students will benefit, usually to student council or the likes, if they did not have a plan to disperse it beforehand the graduating class, because officially, once they graduate, they have no rights to that money, they can't vote. Before they graduate, Katie and her office tries to make sure that that plan is set forth. Like, I think this year's class has like $53 left over. We have finance, we've already talked about this, we're checking it next month's finance. We'll say whether or not it's going, or they already have plans.
Okay.
That happens usually annually, you have to kind of go through the whole year just to set it.
Okay, great, thank you. And then for the athletics report, when they're talking about sports team, is that including the JV modified and varsity
Which
teams?
report are you talking about?
It's just in general. It says girls tennis, girls volleyball,
Oh, on the
boys
funds.
soccer. Is that, yeah, the funds?
That's the whole program.
That's the whole program. Okay. Okay. In the general fund, the outstanding encumbrance was a little over 24 million. Was that part of the deficit that we're seeing now in the budget, or is that different?
No. The directions are directed here until the board president says anything else. The amount of money, so that you know, is sort of what we talked about in our budget. If we have outstanding money, we've been reinvesting it according to policy. If there's an encumbrance, it means the money is already spoken for. If it's unencumbered, that's the money that we can address. And that is the money that they've been using so that it doesn't interrupt our cash flow position throughout month to month. Correct, Ian? Thank you.
Okay, so that's the difference between the unencumbered balances and the...
It sort of keeps track of the whole budget. It's either been encumbered, which means we can no longer touch it until it's verified and free, and unencumbered means we have access to it, but it's budgeted. So say early on, say we have a $100 million budget, and we know that during the first quarter we need $30 million of that budget. We may not have $70 million encumbered. Now, good business offices, which I do have, they will encumber certain things so that they get ahead of it, and that we're not taking risks. The unencumbered, that's sort of what we were talking about. And Katie, the business office, has used that, and so far they've made an additional revenue for this year's budget. It doesn't increase the budget, but it helps to support the budget of $700,000.
Okay, thank you for explaining
Sure.
that to me. I appreciate that. At the bottom of the report, it talks about the transfer funds. Is the food service fund, the lunch money fund that we help pay for the free lunches for the high schoolers? Is that what that transfer was?
And
The transfer is the BOCES aid that we receive for the school lunch BOCES programs. We have to transfer that money to the school lunch fund. So the revenue comes in as BOCES aid, and we transfer it through this line to the school lunch fund.
Okay, thank you. What is the transfer for the special aid fund?
That is.
Oh, it said this, special aid fund. That's fund. Do we have special aid? Is there like, what is special aid?
what I would suggest, because you're asking a lot of questions that we can sit down with, is because this report is covered by finance, I'm not trying to cut you off, but the interest. please feel free, set up time. My business office will sit down and address all of these. I don't know how the rest of the board feels with that. We have no problem doing it.
Oh, yeah, that's why I was emailing him over and I had asked how you guys wanted me to address
I
it.
understand, Katrina, but emailing me at midnight or after midnight before the budget meeting, and then us working on budget, we don't have time to do that. That's why I'm offering at any time, even during our training, we said, if you have questions on the budget, we'll be happy to come in and sit you down with Ann and Katie, and I know they'll take care of it.
Okay, I just wanted to be able, because there are items on the agenda for tonight, so I was trying to ask questions about items on the agenda for tonight.
Okay, I'll leave that to the board.
Other questions?
So can I finish my question?
Oh, I thought you were done. I apologize.
No, I had a lot of questions. I apologize. I have a lot of questions. I'm new and I just, questions are not meant to be something that's like offensive. It's just me gaining knowledge because I think that there's a lot of people at home that, don't know what boards do and what's involved in it. And I think that it can be overwhelming for people, but maybe it helps them get involved because they might learn something. I'm learning new things every day. Thank you for all of your help. I appreciate it. So am I allowed to continue?
Well, I'll give Dan a choice because he's spoken for a while.
I call the question, which under parliamentary rules means that the vote is held immediately. Well, needs a second. The vote is held immediately. No further discussion is allowed. A 2/3 vote is required for passage. If it's passed, the motion on the floor is voted on immediately.
If you have a second, so under the rules, I now take a vote,
So we must have 6.
and we must have 6 to, so we call the question, right? Well, we had a second, so.
Yeah, so now we can vote.
All right, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions?
What was the question? I'm sorry.
It's a rule of Robert's rules, which, as you know, as a board we follow under our policy, that allows for moving forward with consideration of a motion that's on the floor.
Which the motion was the entire financial package. Correct?
Yes.
Is that how you have that?
Yes, yeah.
So at that time, did we have 6 people that authorized the call to question to move
We
the
did.
finance?
We did.
Which means the motion passes, finance is...
Well, we now we have to vote on.
Oh, okay. I didn't...
You first vote on calling the question, and you vote on the motion.
Okay.
Okay, so now,
So, I'm just for clarification, so we're allowed to, so when am I allowed to have my questions, will my questions ever get answered?
Dr. Douglas said they would be with you at any time, or the report in detail and answer the question.
Okay.
all right, so now, there's a motion on the floor with a first and a second for,
Lauren, can I just say something real quick? This will just be real quick. Katrina, you sent 119 questions. I counted them. You sent 119 questions.
At 1:14 a.m.
At 1:14 a.m. There is no way for this board to be able to reasonably respond in less than a 24-hour time period with 119 questions. I pulled them into a Word document and I questioned them out at 119. There is no way you essentially, in essence, are holding us as a board hostage by asking 119 questions without giving us time to respond, to digest, to allow our superintendent and our staff to respond. And then to sit here and ask a large portion of those during a business meeting when it's already 9:10 p.m. and we have a lot of other business to handle. Dr. Douglas has offered an opportunity for you to go and sit with our business representatives who are the ones that are the most qualified, that can give you the most detailed answers. That's why Dan is calling for us to move forward with the vote.
So now, we need to, there's a first and second on action, finance item 6.02 to 6.24. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
I'm going to oppose because I don't have.
Abstentions. All right, moving on to section 7, we have one item, HR recommendation 7.02. Can I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Curiosities, discussion, comments?
Sorry.
Mr. Johnson?
I have a little expertise in negotiations of public sector contracts and individual employee contracts. I had an opportunity to review some of them prior to this meeting, and I'd just like to report to the board. In my opinion, they are consistent with what we're seeing in other school districts for public sector employees, and the changes made are consistent with what I'm seeing back here as well.
Thank you.
I just want to congratulate the administrative team and Tom in coming to this negotiated contract. I know it's hard work, and I really appreciate the work that's been done. I also want to take just a moment, Mr. Conklin, and let the public know that Dr. Douglas was not ignoring the 119 questions he was directed by the board officers not to answer because of the lateness of the time and the amount of time it would have taken to answer. So I just wanted to make sure that was crystal clear. That was not of his own volition, that was through the direction of the board and my job.
Gina?
So I apologize for the late email. I work all the time and I get very little opportunities to be able to go through, and I try to do my due diligence to read through all the stuff and ask my questions when I can, and that's typically when my children are sleeping. I did put at the beginning of the thing that I realized that things were late, and I had even pulled time aside in the hallway during our break to ask him, you know, do you want me to wait to ask these questions, or do you want me, because I realized they were late, do you want me to wait for you to email them or not? I did ask him that. I understand, like,
All right,
it never seems like it's a good time to ask the
board
question.
comments. Right now, we have a motion on HR.
Okay, so going back to that point though, for the motion for HR, it was a lot to try to get through all of the contracts, to read over all of it. And it's not that I'm opposed to anything in necessarily the contracts. I just don't think I was given a full opportunity to truly review everything and to understand everything within these contracts, because it was only just posted a few days before. So I just wanted to have more time to review this information. That's all.
Other comments? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
Abstention.
Section 8, miscellaneous items for action. We have 8.02. Can I have a motion? Inquiries, discussion, comments? Call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Item number 9, Policy Committee, 9.02 to 9.05. Can I have a motion?
So moved. Second.
Curiosities, discussion, comments?
Clarification, does the committee report come before the vote?
So yeah,
Yes.
I apologize.
it was a new structure we put in, I think Dan did it last time.
I need a motion to withdraw the motion, I think.
I think, yeah, pause on that.
Oh, okay.
And I actually wasn't at the meetings, Mr. Christmas.
Oh. Zoned out, sorry.
So the policy committee met on February 28th, and we had first readings on 3 different policies in the 5,000 series that we're reviewing: 5451, 5453, and 5454. And all of those are in the agenda with recommended changes coming before the board for first reading. And then we had our second readings on 5450, 5451.1, and then 7900 workplace violence, which is, it's not in the sequence, as you can see, it's 7900, but that is a legally required policy, and that's why that is being considered out of the sequence. And all of those 3 are second readings, so recommended adoption this evening. And we continue to table 5405, student wellness, while it's being considered in its totality by various district stakeholders. And there was no other good in order.
All right, so now I go back to the motion. It's still a valid motion with a second. All right, so do I have any discussion, comments, curiosities? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? All right, now we have board policies first reading, 10.01 to 10.03. No motion required here, just if anybody has any curiosities or something they'd like to comment on. Aaron.
On 10.3, which is student automobile use, for 5454, I was just looking at line 3, and if we go down to line 7, those are pretty repetitive. So if I could offer a suggestion or just a remark, would be to remove line 3 and turn line 7 into a
Could you read it just so that line
Sure.
3, sometimes my
Yeah.
line 3 is
Yeah.
not your line 3.
Got it. So it says, in order for a student to be allowed to drive to school daily, and then it says, and park in the designated student parking area, the student must, and then it goes into possess a valid driver's license, obtain a school sticker, and then it goes on to say, all students must park in their designated parking areas a second time. Right, so if we could just consolidate that maybe and remove the end park, what's highlighted in line 3 and what's highlighted in line, really essentially turn line 7, all students must park in their designated parking areas, as like a number 3.
Caitlin's making the notes, I can see already. so.
I wrote it down here if that helps you. Okay.
I'll take that back to the committee.
Okay, yeah, just to clean it up a little bit, because it is a little bit repetitive, and then it'll be really clean on 1, 2, and 3, and done.
Thank you.
Others? All right, so now we go to section 11, and the first part of section 11 is the president's report. So I have a couple of things I wanted to discuss. First, I wanted to address some things from last month's board meeting. And one of the things from last month's board meeting was regarding the issue of filling a vacated seat on the board. And I talked to our district attorney, plus I did some searching at the University of Google for some other information. And together, this is what I learned. The courts and the commissioner would prefer that the seat be filled, but there is no legal obligation or requirement to do so. There are 4 options available to a board to fill a seat. Option number 1, the board can appoint a person to fill the vacated seat. Option number 2, there may be a public election within 90 days of the seat being vacated. Number 3, the BOCE superintendent can step in and make an appointment. And number 4, the board can leave the seat vacant until the next school board election. So those are the 4 legal options that a board is given, and our board chose number 4, a legal option. So any mention that the board is somehow operating in an illegal fashion is totally false. Secondly, I just want to reiterate Mr. Johnson's comment about a quorum, as board policy is the kind of the law of under which we operate. There was a discussion about what constitutes a quorum, and Mr. Johnson referenced our board policy, which clearly states in our district a quorum is 5. So that's our board policy, and that is clearly stated. And then secondly, earlier this evening, I referenced an email all board members and the superintendent received from Katrina, and then other board members referenced at various parts in the meeting the same email. And as indicated by other board members, the timestamp on my email was 1:14 a.m. The email contained, as Erin indicated, 119 questions which Katrina believed needed addressing by tonight's meeting. Assuming most individuals are asleep at 1:14 a.m. and start work at 8 a.m., and knowing we had an executive council or an executive session at 5:15 p.m. tonight, at best, that gave 9 hours to gather information to answer those 119 questions. Many of the questions were not related to tonight's agenda, and therefore were not relevant for discussion this evening. The request for so many particulars was untimely. Therefore, after consulting with Liz, I directed the superintendent not to respond and to continue the work he had planned for today in preparation for tonight. You will note that Katrina was able to ask many of her agenda-related questions and get answers to many of her inquiries. However, this last-minute request for voluminous information reaffirms the importance of the ad hoc committee and its work to codifying norms under which this board and future boards should operate. That's the end of my report. I open it to other board member comments. Okay.
So I have 2 comments. The first one, what is related to what you just said, and I just want to reiterate, as board members, it is our job to adequately prepare for board meetings. And on multiple occasions, tonight and in previous meetings, Katrina has stated that she did not have enough time based on when things were posted. And it is common that there will be things that, because of how operations occur in the district, might be posted the day before, might be posted 2 days before. However, related to the contracts, on Dr. Douglas's weekly update back from March 1st, he said that those contracts would be on tonight's board agenda, right? So, we all were notified ahead of time that that was going to be something that we were going to be voting on tonight. And I think that it's incumbent of all of us, we all have busy schedules, we all lead other lives, that we need to set aside time the day before or even that day to read through everything so we can all vote on it's our job as a board member to vote, not to abstain because we didn't have enough time to prepare. So I just wanted to, this has been weighing on me for multiple meetings because it's a recurring thing, and I just wanted to get that out. Secondly, we had a community engagement event on Tuesday evening. 2 things with that. So we put the community engagement committee together 2 years ago?
Yes,
A year ago?
middle of the year.
And we put it together because we were being told that our community was not having enough opportunity to weigh in on what the district was doing and also to learn about the district. We have since had 3 of these evenings. The first one was on safety, and it was okay attended. I'm thinking maybe there were 12 community members there. A lot of staff was there, but there were 12 community members. At the one that we had a few months ago on technology, I don't think there was any community members. One? There was one community member. On Tuesday night, we did it on a very hot topic, which is on the capital improvement project, of which we have been told that there are community members that did not know what was happening with Center Street and did not know what was happening with these capital improvement projects. So there was a lot of hours that was spent on preparation for that event on Tuesday night. So one, I want to thank everybody in the school district who prepared for that because it was excellent. The presentation was excellent, the visuals were excellent, the tour was great. But what I'm most disappointed in is the fact that we only had 4 community members there. Lots of administrators, many of you are in this room and you were there, and it was great to have that opportunity, but our administrators can walk through the school anytime, right, and see those improvements. So my question to the board, as we start looking at committees for next year and we start looking at these, what is the return on investment for the effort that we're putting into these community engagement evenings when we're not getting community members? So I just want to, I think that's something that we need to discuss as we go into next year, maybe even discuss it as part of the end of the year board evaluation. But it is a concern of mine because the amount of time, especially during the budget time, right? So everybody working on that presentation is also working on preparing the budget. And I just don't think it's the best use of the district's time. That's all I have.
Other members?
Yeah, I have some comments, of course, I have some comments. So, in regard to the abstentions I said that as far as being able to be prepared and asking the questions, I already said I apologize that it happened at 1:14. It always seems like you guys think I have like this malicious intent behind. I'm asking the questions because I've been told to ask questions. I asked in the hallway, when do you want me to do it? But little did I know that all of a sudden everybody thinks I'm just trying to ask all these questions and not get answers. So, but as far as that goes with the HR recommendation, if the contracts for something are finalized and they don't have to be done till June, what is the harm in allowing the board as a whole to review documents further in advance? I don't see the harm in that. I also am just going to say I would appreciate not being yelled at anymore. I would also appreciate not being told by other members of the board how I should act, because I certainly never tell anybody else on here how they should act. And going back to some other things, I would like to make a motion for the next policy committee meeting to go over board member orientation so that we can clear some things up with that policy. Okay, so I make a motion. Is there a second?
I don't think a motion's necessary. We are on the policy committee, and there's good of the order section. You can bring it up at the next policy committee meeting, anytime or any meeting you want.
Okay, I guess I get confused because at the one time when we were at the policy committee meeting, I was talking about the transportation thing, you guys said to bring it up to the full board, if you wanted to work on something. So that's when I bring it up.
I don't know that. But you should let Dr. Douglas know that you'd like to talk about that at the next meeting.
Okay, if I could, just to be able to navigate, I think a lot of these things could be really straightened out if we just had some clear lines on, you know, when you're a new board member, this is how you get things on an agenda, this is how you talk about things, and this is, you know, all of that would be great. I'm just really tired of being bullied.
So, exciting news. This just in. We have a norms committee, and we had our first meeting on Monday. It was really, really productive. I really appreciate everyone's time and attention at that meeting. I say this just in because I want to clarify a couple things. We are covering new board member orientation in that committee, so we are addressing that. We are also addressing a number of other things to make sure that's streamlined and that we do have a better box and better opportunities. I do want to point out for everyone that while I understand your frustration, Katrina, you are welcome to be part of that committee and you declined the offer. So when those policies come back to the board for final decision, I welcome your input. But at this time, we are moving that forward. And I want to again thank the committee for their hard work. We have about 4 more meetings on the docket, and I'm hoping it'll only take 3, if that, to get through it, and we can do that to the next step. I also want to address a word that was just used that I don't believe is appropriately being used, and is a very, very charged word, the word bullying. I take that very personally. We are in a school setting. Bullying is not appropriate. I don't believe that the actions of myself or fellow board members, we'll take today, for example, have been bullying. Sometimes we don't agree with what's being said, but that is how things work. We are one board, one voice, and we need to stand united.
Oh, a point of clarification about being asked to be on the committee. I had said I need to think about it, and then it was just brought to the agenda that night. So I never actually
I believe you're being disingenuous with that explanation. I texted you and asked if you wanted to be on the committee. And then that night, after the text was a board meeting, I asked you in person, and you did in fact say you would get back to me, and you never did. By the day of I had to make a decision for who was going to be on the committee. You never got back to me. So I didn't believe that it's my responsibility to contact you more than once. And I actually contacted you twice, via text and via personal request at a board meeting. So you seemed disinterested when I talked to you at the board meeting, and the fact that 8 days later you hadn't contacted me, I took your disinterest for you didn't want to serve. So if you wanted to serve, you clearly had time to get back to me. And then I want to say, I also think what you define as bullying, I define as board members having a different opinion than you do. And the fact that there are people with different opinions that you disagree with, and they push back against your opinion, does not make that bullying. It makes for a robust discussion of the topics that are before us.
Okay, so going back to the September meeting when I first initially tried to ask my questions, and then we were sent into executive session for board dynamics. And that was the third meeting that as a new board member I was put into. And from then on, it has only gotten progressively worse. I continue to try to do what I'm supposed to do, like I did tonight. I sent the questions so that people could have time to prepare. I didn't say they all had to be answered tonight. I asked Tom in the hallway when do you want me to talk about these things? I even asked Dan a couple questions tonight. I'm trying to do my best. There are no clear lines for how you're supposed to be handling these things. So I also don't appreciate that with what you said, Liz, so then I'm going to make a motion for that executive content for board dynamics to no longer be executive content, because then we would be allowed to discuss it in the open, because I had to have my parents come and pick me up from there, and you can pull the videotapes if you want to from the school, from how I left that night, and I would appreciate it. I haven't been doing it to anybody else. So at this meeting, I am just saying to please stop. And I have that motion on the table.
Is there a second? Mr. Christmas?
Wait, can we kill motions?
Oh, do I have to say the motion failed? Okay. The motion failed.
I think honestly, the board members I tried to answer your questions. All of us went through board orientation, right? All of us understand we don't know everything, but the district is here to help. It's all a matter of being open to advice and input, but frankly, also kind of meeting things halfway. If you think 119 questions at 1:14 a.m. on the day of the board meeting constitutes, a good faith effort to get informed for the board meeting, I think, that's problematic. And instead of blaming all of us, think about how you're preparing and how you're going about trying to get that information.
Right, I'm not blaming anybody. I'm not doing anything like that. I just posed my questions for those things when I had them, and then I asked when I'm supposed to ask the questions. And I always ask Doug all the questions. He asks me all the time. I send him texts, and he'll say, I don't know these. Go ahead and try to ask. And so that's what I try to do. That's it. I wasn't trying to say every single one of my questions had to be answered tonight at the meeting. That's not what I did. But everybody's just continuously assuming that. Anyway, I make a motion to adjourn.
Second? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes Pie Day. I hope everybody has a piece of pie when they go home for dessert. And our next meeting will be Thursday, March 27th, 6 o'clock at the MMC. Thank you, everyone.